Welcome to Voices from the Other Side, where vacations turn into warnings and the sea keeps more than memories. If you're new here, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and give this video a like so more night travelers can find us. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Your comment might open our next episode. Tonight we board the Azure Meridian. Glittering lounges, blind corners, doors marked crew only, and a trail of clues that shouldn't exist, an order placed after midnight, a sensor ripped from skin, and coordinates that arrive by postcard weeks too late. Keep your eyes on the color that doesn't belong. When the lights dip at 00:17 and the ship exhales, listen. If you hear the pattern, 3 taps, a pause, you're already inside the story. Story 1, The Woman in the Citron Coat. We boarded the Azure Meridian in Copenhagen with the kind of optimism you only feel inside a glass terminal, when luggage wheels hum on clean floors and everyone believes their week will be simple. 10 nights around the Baltic, Stockholm, Tallinn, Helsinki, back through the archipelago to Germany and home. My partner, Lena, had packed 2 scarves and a guidebook with tabs. I brought noise-canceling headphones and the quiet hope that changing water every day might change us a little too. From the top deck, Copenhagen slid away like a postcard in a breeze, spires, cranes, a red-roofed quilt. The ship itself felt like a city that had forgotten to sleep. A sky atrium ringed by cafes, a theater dressed like a seashell, a miniature park under glass where you could walk in a loop and pretend your footsteps meant something. Our cabin on deck 8 had a narrow balcony and a view of blue when it was day, our own reflection when it was night. On the second morning, as the Orson turned from steel to slate to a color you can't name unless you grew up with ships, I noticed her. She sat alone beneath the atrium's vertical garden, a woman in a citron yellow coat that cut through the gray like a traffic flare. Mid-40s maybe. A scarf, same sharp color, was knotted at her throat even though the air inside was warm. She wasn't elegant, she was intent. Every few seconds her gaze snagged a face and held it too long, then moved on. Her coffee cooled untouched. The phone in her hand was the kind people use for everything, and she worked its screen as if the right combination of swipes might unlock a door. Old flame? Lena said, smiling at nothing in particular. Wrong timeline, I said, but I watched the way people skirted the woman without knowing they were doing it, the way you skirt a wet floor and later swear you didn't. We saw the coat again that afternoon on the promenade, the ship's endless loop that makes you feel virtuous for walking in circles. She was talking to a deckhand, thumb pressed to the screen, showing him a photograph. He shook his head slowly with the careful patience people use around grief or fury, and she moved on to a second crew member, then a third. The air around her felt charged, as if she were carrying weather. At dinner, our assigned table mates, 2 retirees from Swansea who spoke about cruising the way enthusiasts speak about trains, shared the unofficial news feed. Someone hasn't been back to her cabin, the wife said quietly, as if the ship itself could overhear. Staff won't say missing, they say not located. Her husband made a face and sipped his wine. They never say missing. Lena squeezed my knee under the table. We don't get involved, she said later, as if reminding us both who we were. The third morning, the ship's loudspeaker offered weather and water temperature and a joke about herring, and then we were at sea the way you're sometimes in an elevator, moving without feeling it. I woke before Lena and wandered. The Azure Meridian in early light felt disassembled, escalators asleep, a piano with its lid down, cleaners rolling carts that murmured rather than rattled. On deck 5, near a door that said crew service only in a font designed to be ignored, I heard voices around the corner. Not a wellness break, a woman said, voice raw with the hard edge of overnight. She's type 1. Her insulin is in the cabin. That's noted, a man answered. He had the calm you put on for work. We've alerted local authorities at our next port. We are reviewing recordings. We ask for your continued. Do not say patience to me. I leaned just enough to see. The citron coat up close. The wool pilled where a handbag had rubbed all winter. The scarfs not leaving a pale line on her throat. Her eyes were red-rimmed in a way that suggested rinsing rather than sleep. The man wore officer's stripes and the expression of someone trying to uninstall a situation from reality. Last verified time stamp? She demanded. When did you last see her on camera? 23:41, he said, exiting the starboard lounge. Then she should have been in bed by midnight. The scarf trembled with her breath. We share a cabin. She never made it back. I left before they saw me, heart banging in a way that felt disproportionate until Lena, still in the bed we'd pretended was ours, looked at my face and said, "What did you hear?" We reported what I'd overheard to guest services. A young man with a polished smile typed while nodding, thanked us for our diligence, and offered sparkling water we didn't want. The word protocol appeared 3 times in 3 minutes. He did not write down citron coat. That afternoon, serendipity or fate, or the way ships throw people at each other, the woman in the coat found us instead. We were at a rail on deck 12, watching the Baltic perform its trick of appearing flat until a gray ridge runs through it like a sleeping animal turning over. She stepped beside us so quietly that I didn't notice until the color entered my peripheral vision like a flare. "You were listening this morning," she said. No accusation, just a line drawn under a fact. I said, "I'm Noor." Her hand was cold. She didn't offer her last name and didn't seem to need ours. "My friend is Petra. We've traveled together since university. She doesn't vanish. She texts me from the next room. She has alarms for insulin at 1, 7 and 1. Her phone shows those alarms." Noor swallowed. "Do you know what else it shows?" She took out the phone and opened the cruise app. A tiny bell icon displayed a rectangle, room service order 0108, herbal tea, fruit plate. "I was in the cabin at 1:08, Noor said. "No one came. Someone used her profile to make the ship think she was alive in our room." Lena's eyebrows knit. "Where did you last see her?" "Starboard lounge." Noor said, "She went to hear a pianist and never came back. I found this on our pillow yesterday morning." From her coat pocket, she produced a towel animal's head, felt eyes, striped terry curled into a swan. It would have been whimsical except a clear, circular patch, tacky with removed glue, was pressed to the terry's fabric. The plastic looked like a lens until you imagined it stuck to skin. "A sensor," I said. "From her glucose monitor," Noor said. "It was new. It shouldn't have fallen off." I keep telling them that, and they keep telling me it happens. "Show us," Lena said, the way she says "show me where it hurts" to nieces who can't describe the place. We followed Noor along her route. Starboard lounge, piano, men in sport jackets, women in dresses they owned because someone they loved had said you should. A ceiling bubble camera watched without seeming to. Noor pointed out a column clothed in mirror. If you hugged it, you could slip out of sight for a beat. A half wall made a wedge of shadow. Then the corridor to deck 8, carpet thick enough to swallow footsteps, a fire stair whose door drifted open on its own size. 1 level down, a landing marked crew only. 1 level up, a dead end at a door with a keypad that hummed when your hand got close. We returned to guest services. The officer on duty this time wore a name pin that said V. Santos and a face that said he had rehearsed every sentence he was about to speak. "We are cooperating fully," Santos said. "We have protocols." "What are the protocols for a diabetic who is 12 hours late to her medication?" Noor asked. "What are the protocols for towel animals with medical devices glued to them?" Santos's professional compassion did not blink. "We are searching every guest and crew area. We will find your friend faster if you rest." We didn't rest. That night, Lena and I lay in the narrow dark and listened to the ship breathe. You don't realize a ship breathes until you pay attention. A slow exhale in the vents, a hum that changes key when the captain turns your world a notch to the left, a shiver when the Baltic remembers it's still cold beneath. At 00:17, Nor called. "I found something," she said. Her watch. Where? Not where. A breath that wasn't a laugh. What it's talking to. By the time we reached Nor's cabin, she'd pulled up an app that people use to locate the fitness bands they claim they don't care about but check anyway. The screen showed a dot with a Bluetooth bloom around it pulsing on a silhouette of the ship. The dot was not on deck 8, it was below. The label read, "Thermal Laundry, Deck 2. Her band, Nor said. "It's pinging from a place passengers can't go." You learn things about a ship's organs you're not meant to think about when your day's plan had been museums, and suddenly it's find the place where fabric goes to be cleansed. The thermal laundry smelled like damp heat and chemical lemon. It sang with the slow percussion of machines. A supervisor in a white coat looked through us the way busy people look through tourists. "Not a guest area," she said, making the words round and patient. "You must return to your deck." "Her watch is here," Nor said. "It won't be when we come back with security, please." The supervisor hesitated, not at Nor's pleas, but at the word security. You could see her do the math. If she helped, she was a person. If she didn't, she was a policy. She touched a radio and asked for Santos. He arrived with 2 officers and spoke with enough kindness to make the next sentence feel less like what it was. "You can stand here," he told us, "but do not enter." He and his team passed through a door marked staff only with a keycard tap that made the tiny tone our own door made, the sound of "you belong." We waited in the corridor where the air was cooler and the lemon smell thinned to something metallic underneath. A laundry cart clattered past, stacked with sheets in bundles heavy enough to make the metal sag. The corridor bent. On the left, a chute opened to a rubber-lipped mouth. The metal scuffed where bags met it. Someone had hung a sign, "No loose items, bag before drop," in English, then in 5 languages we did not read. Lena touched my wrist. "There," she whispered. A clear ring of adhesive, just a trace, clung to the rubber lip. A second, smeared, sat 2 inches below like a ghost of the first. The circles were the same size as the plastic sticker Nor had shown us on the towel swan. "I want to believe she pressed her arm there for balance," Lena murmured. Santos returned with a tight face and a bundle under his arm. He held up a purple coil hair tie tinged gray with lint. "Found in a sorting bin," he said. "Could be anyone's." Nor's hand moved to her own wrist, bare. "She wore those," she said. She twisted them when she read. "Laundry logs show a load started around 23:55 last night," Santos said. "Operator ID is listed as user 000. What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the login didn't register," Santos said. "Or someone used a generic credential. Or someone doesn't exist," Nor said. "Ma'am," Santos said softly, "we are doing everything within our authority." Within our authority is a phrase that means there are rooms on this ship you will never see. They opened the chute's maintenance hatch an hour later with 2 engineers, a bolt set, and an insistence that we stand as far back as if the hatch could bite. Inside, a slick shine of metal, the suggestion of a handprint blurred by heat, nothing else. The chain across the interior hung untouched. The engineers argued in low voices about whether it had been latched or had swung since last inspection. Someone had written the date on the inside of the hatch with a paint pen 2 weeks ago. Initials, a number. User 000 is not a pair of initials. The ship docked in Stockholm the next morning with discreet police waiting in dark jackets. They came aboard between guests who had dressed for photographs with the embassy district in the background and those who had packed sneakers for the Vasa Museum. Somewhere on deck 2, dogs patted tile, noses working, tails neutral. The official announcement asked passengers to remain patient as crew completed a routine operation. Patience, like Lemon, was everywhere. Nor did not leave the ship. She collected herself into a chair in the atrium, where the citron coat became a small sun in an overcast palazzo, and sat with her phone, refreshing an app that showed a dot that flashed and then danced and then went still. Lena brought her tea she did not drink. I sat uselessly and tried to imagine a person small enough to pass into a world of sheets and steam and emerge folded. By Talon, the story had grown edges. Someone said there had been camera outages on Deck 7, alignment mode during docking, a phrase like a shrug. Someone else said a crew member had been questioned and released and now worked in a different uniform that said technician instead of laundry. Rumors are ships of their own. They carry you away and never dock. On the 5th night, Noor knocked on our door. She had taken off the coat. Without it, she seemed smaller, as if the yellow had been a muscle she couldn't flex anymore. "I need a favor," she said. "Use your voice to say this out loud where other people can hear me." We found a quiet bar that had stopped being quiet a few minutes before, because quiet bars on ships always do. Noor told her story from the beginning, not the embroidered story the ship had stitched around her, but the plain one you could lay on a table, time stamps. A towel swan with a sensor glued to its mouth, a hair tie retrieved from a hamper, a watch's digital heartbeat pinging from a room where no guests go. A handful of people listened without interrupting. A handful left, not because they didn't care, but because caring that much makes you too big for your skin. A man in a sweater with elbow patches asked, "Why would anyone?" "I don't know," Noor said. "I only know she is not where she should be, and somebody would find that easier if we called it a story instead of a person." The ship's officers made a show of presence the next day, white uniforms, radios that hissed, clipboards with checklists whose boxes gleamed like tiny, satisfied windows. The captain made an announcement that included the words cooperate, authorities, privacy. It did not include Petra's name. On the last morning, while we eased back toward Copenhagen, Noor stood by the rail without her coat and held the phone like a prayer. Dots don't flash forever. Batteries die. The screen went to sleep. Noor didn't. We exchanged numbers we would not use because what would you text after a week like that? "Thinking of you? Did they call you back? Are you still on hold inside the life you had?" We hugged awkwardly in a corridor where suitcases thumped and children dragged stuffed bears with one eye and the smell of ship carpet. The Azure Meridian returned us to the same terminal where it had loaned us the idea of simplicity. We went home to laundry we did ourselves, and water we could pretend was the Baltic if we looked across it quickly. Lena put the guidebook on a shelf. I opened a mapping app at night and followed the route we'd sailed with my finger like a child, connecting points, pretending a line explains a journey. 2 weeks later, a padded envelope arrived without a return address. Inside, a postcard of a waterfront cafe under a gray sky, white parasols furled, a line of bicycles, a hint of a cathedral behind. Helsinki sat in clean letters at the bottom. Taped across the picture was a printed screenshot, a capture from a harbor webcam I didn't know existed until I looked up the name in small type at the corner. In the image's background, blurred by a drizzle that looked like static, a woman in a Navy crew hoodie with a white medical cross armband walked past a vending machine. Her wrist was bare. The hood shaded her face, but the tilt of her head had a familiarity that made my throat tighten before my brain found a reason. She moved with a careful economy, the kind you practice after illness. Save the big motion for when it's necessary, spend small motions as if they cost. On the back of the postcard, 3 numbers written in block print: 60, 169, 24, 952, 14, 17, coordinates and a time. A pin on a map and a moment in a day that wasn't ours. I opened the map. The pin dropped near a ferry pier not for our ship, but for smaller boats that stitch the city's islands together, a place where crew might pass unnoticed on breaks between shifts, or where someone pretending to be crew might walk in a hoodie and keep their head down and let the world continue not knowing their name. I carried the card to Lena. She slid her finger along the tape, tracing the printed pixelation of a face that might not be the face we wanted it to be. "Don't call Noor," she said softly. "Not yet, not until we know what we're saying." "What are we saying?" I asked. "That it's possible to survive and leave," she said, "or that someone wants you to think so." At night, when the refrigerator hum shifts a half-tone and the building's pipes exhale, I hear the ship again. The way decks carry footsteps you don't see, the way a door 6 cabins down can sound like it's inside your wall. I hear the thunk-thunk of laundry bags hitting rubber, the soft swish of fabric going where it will be made clean. In that sound, faint, something like a knock, and in the knock a rhythm. One, then a pause longer than comfort, then one, then two. I think of Noor sitting under the atrium's green wall, a small sun wrapped around her shoulders, attacking the screen of her phone as if she could make the world behave by finding the right icon. I think of Petra, who could be a person sitting on a ferry pier with a hood up, waiting for a ride that isn't hers, or a person the ocean kept, or a person the ship swallowed into a part of itself built to be unseen. I think of the towel swan with someone else's heartbeat stuck to its mouth. Stories are a way to make a pattern out of a mess. At sea, the mess wins more often than we admit. But if you ever walk a promenade beneath a sky low as a lid, and you see a woman in a citron coat scanning faces like arrival boards, don't look away out of politeness. People are always arriving. People are always not located. Your face might be the first one to say, "I see you." Say her name, "I'm listening." Noor leaves us with a postcard, 3 numbers, and a question the sea never answers out loud. Maybe Petra walked away. Maybe the ship learned a new way to keep quiet. Either way, the azure meridian fades into rain, and the Baltic closes over the gap like a zipper. But ships don't just hide people in their walls. They also hide people in their schedules, inside the moments when night is thinner than sleep, and a latch is the only law that matters. So let's step off one vessel and onto another. New carpet pattern, new captain's voice, new promise of easy mornings and buffet afternoons, and somewhere down a different hallway, no balcony, no view, there's a digital clock glowering the color of emergency. Some stories end with coordinates. Others begin with a sound, not a scream, not a splash, just a knock that returns like a habit. If Noor's lesson was that the ocean has places where sound can't travel, this one is simpler and meaner. Sometimes sound travels perfectly and no one believes it. Different ship, different deck. A therapist with a perfect smile who knows exactly where you like your shade. An app with a dolphin that isn't cute at all. A key card that learns to open for the wrong hands. Keep your eyes on the little things. Tape the size of a thumbnail, a zipper that's straighter than you left it, a safe that feels tidier. And when the clock blinks 3:18, remember Noor's rule. The right detail is louder than any announcement. Ready? Leave a light on, cover the peephole, and listen with us. Story 2, a knock at 3:18. I wasn't supposed to be on a cruise at all. I was supposed to still be married, still living in a townhouse that smelled like cinnamon candles and compromise, still pretending the quiet in my chest wasn't loneliness but contentment. Then the lawyer slid a thin envelope across a table, a judge stamped a page, and a friend who loves me said, "You need to go somewhere that isn't your kitchen." So I booked the Sunward Halo, a glossier-than-me ship bound for 7 too-bright days in the Caribbean. If you've never cruised, there's a certain kind of optimism in the terminal, an expensive soap smell that promises you'll become the kind of person who wears linen as if it were a personality. I packed one sundress, 3 swimsuits, and the part of myself that still believed in new starts. My therapist added homework. Do one thing you've never done. I said sure and circled an onboard spa brochure with words like biohacking and reset in a font that looked like it exfoliated. My cabin was an inside stateroom on deck 10, no balcony, a queen bed, a desk, a shower the size of a kind lie. I liked it immediately. It felt like a blank page. The spa lived 2 decks up inside a white box labeled Vital Glow LAB. Not a spa, they said, a performance clinic. Red light chambers hummed like beehives. Cryo tanks promised you'd be reborn at minus 120. Someone in a lab coat fitted me for bone-conducting headphones and told me my mitochondrial efficiency was about to sing. The man who sold me my Reset bundle had a name tag that said Theo and the kind of smile you practice in a mirror. You're traveling alone, he said, as if he discovered a plot twist. Very brave. It's not a cliff. I said, everything is a cliff if you're not careful. He handed me a schedule card filled with boxes, red light at noon, cold plunge at 4, guided breathwork at dusk. We'll see you at 11 tomorrow. Deck chairs on the starboard side have the best shade, he added, like an aside. I hadn't told him where I liked to sit. Day 1, I let strangers blast me with crimson light. Day 2, I stood in a tank that looked like a gentle refrigerator and tried not to curse at minus 110. I came out shivering and laughing because sometimes survival looks like humor. By day 3, I'd made a diary of small rituals. Iced coffee from the cafe near the theater, 4 laps on the promenade before noon, 2 chapters of a book on a sun I claimed near the aft pool. It felt good to be predictable to myself. Maybe that's why the first knock startled me the way it did. Not the sound, every ship door knocks like an apologetic robot, but the timing, 3:18 a.m. At that hour, even the ocean seems to whisper. I woke with the immediate clarity your body gives you when something isn't right. 3:18. The red digits on the bedside clock glowed like a warning label. I didn't speak. I didn't move more than a breath. Between the knock and my heartbeat, there was a new sound, the soft, wrong chirp of the lock engaging. The latch held. The handle tugged once, twice, giving like a wrist tested by someone who pretends to be casual. Another knock, not frantic, patient. Wrong room, I said, voice steadier than I felt. No answer. The door was quiet in the way that means someone is listening. When I told guest services the next morning, the woman with the neat bun asked if I was sure. Sometimes the ship adjusts in the night, she said. Metal moving can sound like a person trying my handle. I finished. She nodded sympathetically at her screen. If it happens again, call security from your room phone. I bought a doorstop in port, one of those rubber wedges shaped like a triangle of stubbornness, and balanced it beneath the latch because doing something felt better than doing nothing. That evening, as the sun poured itself into the Gulf like honey, I walked past the spa. Theo saw me before I saw him. How was last night? He asked, as if there were only one answer on a cruise ship. Quiet, I said, which was almost true. I didn't add that I'd slept in socks because fear makes you do small, odd things. He smiled. Breakfast at the aft cafe looked good this morning, he said. You're a cinnamon roll person. You watch the breakfast buffet? I asked, aiming for light, landing on flat. I watch the ship, he said. Occupational hazard. See you at 4, Ava. I hadn't told him my last name either. The second knock came at 3:24 a.m., like a bad joke committed to the bit. 2 taps, a pause, another try at the handle, then a long, soft press against the door that made the latch squeal. My heart sprinted. I grabbed the phone, dialed security, and whispered, "Someone is trying to get in." "Stay on the line. Is your latch engaged, ma'am?" "Yes. Help is on the way." I sat there in the kind of silence that isn't silent at all, air units hissing, the low throb of engines, the blood in my ears. Footsteps in the hall, a male voice, "Ship security, you can open up." I did, half a palm's width with the chains still set. 2 officers stood there, both of them very good at looking normal. Nothing in the corridor but the carpet pattern and the last breaths of someone who had been there and wasn't. "No one now," the taller one said, which was comforting in the way a closed window is no wind. "We'll add a note to patrol by your cabin on the overnight." He asked, "Do you have a balcony?" "Interior." "Good, keep your peephole covered," he added, then saw my face and softened it with a practical smile. "People use fisheyes like they are public TV. A piece of tape is your friend." After they left, I peeled a neon post-it out of my book and stuck it over the peephole. Then I slid my key card under 2 paperback novels and slept with my purse under my pillow. A shape any thief would have laughed at, but my lizard brain appreciated. At noon, the spa gave me a lecture on lymphatic flow. At 2, the bartender at the aft pool with the galaxy tattoo on her forearm poured me more ice than whiskey and said, "Everything okay? You look like last call." I told her about the knocks, keeping my voice low because my fear felt like a secret the ship would punish me for telling. She didn't laugh. She didn't say metal moves. Instead, she lifted her phone and showed me an app I didn't recognize, nothing shady looking. Just a utility with a cartoon dolphin logo and the word Nareiki. "People bump into you," she said, tapping her phone against my hip in a demonstration that was half joke, half warning. "If your card is in your back pocket and someone's got a reader in their phone case," she shrugged. "Not a key anymore, more like a copy." "You're saying?" "I'm saying keep your key in the little sleeve it came in or get an RFID blocker at the shop downstairs. And keep receipts of everywhere your card opens. Security cares more when there's a list." I bought a blocker. I bought 2 because fear is a loyal shopper. That evening I saw Theo again. He was with a woman in a robe, the kind of robe that makes you accept things you'd question in street clothes. He stepped away to smile at me. "Sleep better?" he asked. I didn't say I didn't. He tipped his head. "You're a light sleeper," he said like a compliment. "A lot of women are. Hormones, brain wiring, ancient wolves outside the cave." He laughed. "You know, nature." "I thought you've practiced this conversation." "See you at 4 for red light," he added. "I might nap," I said. "Naps, as it happens, reveal how tired you were all along." I fell asleep at 6 and woke at 9 with the feeling of a thought sprinting. My safe door was shut. My suitcase was shut. My toiletries bag was zipped, but all of it felt slightly organized. My makeup brushes, which had been in a drunk little pile, lay in a neat fan. My journal, previously buried under swimsuits, sat on top, a pen resting exactly parallel to the spiral. It felt tidy the way a stranger's hands feel tidy. I took photos, snaps on my phone of drawers, of the zipper pull on my suitcase, of the angle of my wallet in the safe. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. Evidence that I wasn't crazy, maybe. Proof that if I was, it had neat corners. At 3:31 a.m., the knock came again. I was ready this time, which is to say I was scared in a shape that fit me. I'd set my laptop on the desk with the camera pointed at the door. I hit record. The lock chirped its tiny bird call. The handle moved, the latch held. "Wrong room," I said, loud enough for the microphone. Footsteps, slow, unhurried. I waited until the corridor was quiet and called security. "I have video," I said, and this time the sentence made the man on the phone change gears. They came in 5 minutes. The taller officer, his badge said Patel, watched my laptop screen twice, then asked to airdrop the file. "We'll review corridor cameras," he said, "and we'll send a tech to check your lock logs." The tech arrived the next afternoon with a handheld reader and a face like a closed door. He plugged something into the lock and wrote down numbers I couldn't see. 3 entries for housekeeping, he said. one at 4:03 p.m., yesterday one at 10:22 a.m., today, and he squinted. A failed attempt at 3:18. How does it show? I asked. Like the system recognized a credential but didn't accept it. He glanced up. You should keep your card in the sleeve. I did, I said. Sometimes people bump into you. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went to the spa for my scheduled appointment because I needed a room where someone would tell me to breathe like healing was a hobby. Theo was there, an island of linen and peppermint oil. You look tense, he said. Someone tried to open my door again, I said. I watched his eyes. He widened them sympathetically. You should try our sleep protocol, he said. We can schedule a late session. Staff is on until 2. I don't want anyone near my door at 2, I said. That's fair, he said, hands raised. Hey, if you feel unsafe, call me. I work nights. He slid a card across the counter. It said Theo in the same practiced font and had a number hand-scribbled on the back. That night, I ate dinner alone in the buffet and found myself sitting near 2 other women who were obviously traveling solo. There's a posture to it, a kindness you give your own space. One was in her 50s, all angles softened by confidence. The other was 30, maybe, with a braid and a t-shirt that said Girls Who Code. You too? The older one asked, gesturing toward my empty opposite chair like it was a club password. The Knox? I asked before I could stop myself. She went still. The younger one looked between us. What Knox? We traded stories like kids trade ghost tales around a candle. The older woman, June, had woken to the sound of her peephole being covered from the outside. Tape, she said, holding her fingers apart a fraction. When I pulled it off in the morning, it lifted paint. The younger woman, Martina, had returned to her cabin to find her suitcase reorganized to the point of performance. Like a Pinterest post of my own underwear, she said, making a face. I know I leave a mess, it's my mess. We went to guest services together because a story is heavier alone. They listened better to 3 than to 1. Patel met us halfway as if he'd been waiting for the bundle. All right, he said. Here's what we can do. Patrols tighten on deck 10. We'll check access logs for your corridor. And you, he looked at me, keep recording. And what about the spa guy who knows where I sit at breakfast? I asked before I knew I had decided to. Patel's pen paused. Which spa guy? I told him. His pen moved again, this time writing a full name. Back in my cabin, I took everything I'd learned and let it pile into a plan. Fear likes plans. It agrees to sit down if you give it a job. I went to the gift shop and bought an inexpensive UV marker. The type teenagers used to draw on their hands before a rave they pretend not to attend. And a travel-size bottle of neon powder they marketed as party dust for costume nights. Invisible under normal light, loud under UV. I dusted the zipper of a drawstring lingerie bag and left it sitting at an inviting angle on my desk. Inside the bag, I put 1 scarf, 2 decoy bras, and a keychain tracker the size of a coin. I stuck my laptop camera to the inside mirror of the wardrobe, pointed at the desk. I covered the peephole again. I left the bedside lamp on the dimmest glow and pretended to sleep. At 3:18 a.m., as if the hour itself were a person, the lock chirped. My heart tried to bail. The handle turned, the latch held, the door stilled. Then the quiet again, that patient listening. 5 minutes later, the lock chirped again, this time the wrong sound, a longer bleep as if someone was trying a trick. Not tonight, I whispered, to the room or to myself. After 10 minutes of nothing, I crept to the door and slid the chain loose. I opened it to the width of my fear and looked down. A sliver of tape rested on the carpet, exactly where it would have been pressed over my peephole if I hadn't preempted it. My hands shook in a new key. The tracker chimed on my phone movement. Something in my bag was going for a walk. I called Patel. It's happening, I said. He left, but he took bait. "Don't chase," he said. "Stay put." My dot moved down the corridor, turned at the service stair, down a deck, across, stopped, moved again. The path was erratic, the way someone moves when they think they are invisible. Security's channel crackled in my ear through my phone's bad speaker. Copy. Deck 9, portside service stair, now Deck 8, laundry staging. I stayed in the chair because obedience felt like armor. I stayed there until my phone rang. "We've got someone," Patel said. "We'll need you to come identify property." They took me through corridors the ship didn't sell in brochures, metal ribs and fluorescent hum. In a small office near housekeeping, a man stood with his hands open as if that made him honest. Not Theo, a different man. Crew polo. Name tag tucked into a pocket as though names were optional if you were embarrassed. On the table, my decoy scarf, my 2 decoy bras, my dusted bag, glowing loudly under a handheld UV wand. The glow was louder on his palms. I wanted, absurdly, to apologize to him for having hands. Fear makes you kind to what you should not forgive. Found him with 3 guest bags, Patel said. He says he was relocating them because housekeeping asked. He doesn't have the housekeeping order. He does have this. Patel set a phone on the table and opened the case. Inside the case, a wafer-thin card reader, a simple rectangle, a wire coil visible beneath clear plastic. "Not Reiki," I said. The dolphin logo grinned up at us. Patel nodded. "We see this sometimes. People don't bump into you, they brush your pocket in an elevator. Cloned cards are good enough to chirp a lock, but not always good enough to open it." "Always?" I asked. "Not always," he said. "Where's Theo?" I asked, feeling the anger finally catch up to the fear. "He knows things about me he shouldn't." Patel's face didn't change. "We're speaking with spa leadership," he said. It was a sentence that meant we are worried about liability, and we are moving carefully, and you will never hear everything we find. They asked me to sign a property form. They asked me to confirm the video was mine, and the bag was mine, and the powder was, in fact, mine. They took statements from June and Martina, too, who had told security their knocks and their tapes and their Pinterest drawers. Altogether, we looked like a chorus you couldn't ignore. The man with the glowing hands stared at the wall with a focus that made me think of children who pretend not to be. When they led him away, he glanced at me. Not hate, not apology, just a calculation. How many of me existed on the ship, and how many of him? That afternoon, the spa was closed for a private event, which is how you say someone is being escorted out the crew gangway. A rumor arrived anyway, dressed like a fact. Theo was not technically crew. He was an independent contractor through a third-party vendor. He had a master credential for out-of-hours treatment rooms. He had an ID that opened decks his job didn't require. His name tag at the desk had a twin in a locker with a different name in the same font. No one would say he did it. No one needed to. Fear fills blanks eagerly. Patel found me that evening by the railing, where the sea looked like a dark record spinning. "We went through lockers," he said, not quite looking at me. "We recovered items belonging to several guests. Jewelry, scarves, no electronics, nothing that beeps." He paused. "You'll hear from corporate. What about the man with the reader?" "Confined to quarters," he said. "Then to authorities when we dock. This is not the first time. He was working with someone who provided times people were at shows, in the spa, at dinner. Housekeeping did not give those times. The system did." He tapped the air, referencing the cruise app we all used to book pizza like magic. Opt in to convenience, opt in to vulnerability. I didn't sleep well that night, not because I was afraid anymore, though I was, but because quiet had changed shape. The knocks had taught me that silence can hide a person, the way deep water can hide a city. On the last morning, a letter slid under my door. It apologized for inconvenience. It offered on-board credit and our sincere regret. It used the word guest 4 times and my name none. I folded it into my journal because I didn't know whether to frame it or burn it. In the terminal, rolling my suitcase toward a taxi stand, I saw June at the coffee kiosk and Martina by the window counting gates like a game. We hugged the quick way you hug strangers who are not. We promised to check in and probably won't, because survival stories get heavy when you leave the theater. At home, I installed a better lock on a door that wasn't the ship's. I stopped sleeping with my purse under my pillow and started sleeping with a flashlight within reach, which feels like progress if you squint. I bought an RFID wallet not because fear had won, but because it had taught me the rules of a game I hadn't realized I was playing. 2 weeks later, a friend texted me a link. "Is this your boat?" The article had a photo of the sunward halo and a headline that used the word incident safely far from crime. It said a contractor had been terminated for boundary violations. It said the company took guest safety seriously. It did not say my name. It did not say his. Sometimes, after midnight, I wake not because anyone is at my door, but because my body remembers how to be the kind of animal that survives. And I think about 3:18 a.m., a time that turned into a person who turned into a plan that turned into a story I am telling you now. If you are traveling alone, you will hear a lot about bravery and not enough about systems. Bravery is useful. Systems are better. Keep your key where phones can't kiss it. Photograph your drawers if you must. Cover your peephole with something ugly and neon. And if you hear a knock at 3:18, breathe, speak loudly, and remember, the latch is older than the app. Use it. In one story, danger stands on the other side of a door and tests the latch. You outwait it. You learn the app's tricks. You sleep with the light on. But not every threat wears footsteps. Some arrive without a knock, quiet as a misfired word in your own body, turning courage into arithmetic. On another ship, another night, the villain isn't a stalker or a cloned key. It's the clock. It's last known well. It's weather over water. It's a doctor counting options on deck 2 and finding minutes instead of tools. Doors and chains won't help you here. Protocol becomes prayer. The map shrinks to a straight line between a bedside and a helipad, between what should happen and what the sky allows. If the last story taught us how to harden a boundary, this one asks a harder question. What do you hold when the only thing that matters is 19 minutes, and the sea won't give you even that? Story 3, 19 minutes to port. By day 5 of the cruise, my aunt had learned the ship's moods better than the captain's announcements. Callista always could read a room, even when the room was a floating city. She was 67, left-handed, and had the kind of steady optimism that makes you forgive other people's weather. A watercolorist by training, she carried a pocket set of paints the way some people carry mints. She'd sketch on napkins, on the backs of receipts. On the little map, the steward leaves on your bed to show you which way is forward. Light, she liked to say, holding her brush near the ferrule, lives where you don't look. We were on the Solstice Star, 7 nights from Lisbon to the Azores and back again by way of nothingness, up to a line in the ocean where maps put names, but the water does not. I'd booked the trip after her doctor said travel would be fine if you pace yourself. She'd had a scare last winter, a transient episode that stole a word and then put it back, as if to practice. We told ourselves that was rehearsal, and this was the show. The morning it happened, we were in the Ocean View cafe up by the stern windows, where the wake scribbles white on blue like someone practicing cursive. The ship was 3 days out, a clean horizon in every direction, wind a mild rumor. I remember the way the mug looked in her hand, blue ceramic, a hairline chip on the rim she'd already painted over with a dot from her set, a joke about restoration. I remember because her fingers did something they never do. They opened. Coffee spread across our table and inverted the world. Her shoulders pitched. The smile she was wearing, she always wore something like a smile, even when it was only the thought of one, slid to one side of her face and refused to come back. "Auntie," I said, and then I wasn't saying auntie anymore. I was saying, too loud, "I need help," and then the word that unlocks a certain kind of response. Stroke. Training you think you'll never use rises out of you like a reflex. Face drooping, check. Arm drift, her left hand wouldn't rise at all. Speech, she tried to say "I'm fine," and it came out a mess of vowels like a radio between stations. Time, my phone said 9:11. Breakfast trays froze around us, forks hovered. A waiter with a name tag that said Marco had already tapped the radio pinned under his collar. He didn't ask what was wrong. He said Deck 2, medical now, and the cafe rearranged itself into a corridor. We were moving before I could decide to move. 2 crew appeared with a chair on wheels I'd never noticed before. Another met us at the elevator and turned a key that made the doors obey. As we dropped floors, my aunt's right hand found mine with a grip I recognized, the way she held a brush when she meant to commit. The medical center sat low in the hull where the ship forgets to pretend. It smelled like lemon and aluminum. 2 nurses in sea green scrubs had us on a gurney in 4 sentences. A doctor in a navy polo with a crest on the chest, name, I. Ibra met us halfway to a curtain bay he called room 3, which was really one long room with hopes. "What time did symptoms begin?" he asked before hello. 9:10, I said. Maybe 9:09. Last known well, she was complaining that the coffee was weak at 9:08. My voice shook. She was talking normally. He put his stethoscope in his ears and his face into calm. "Ma'am, I'm Dr. Ibara. Squeeze my fingers." She tried. One hand squeezed, one didn't. "Smile for me," he said softly. She did the same broken way. "Stick out your tongue." Off to the side. He nodded once as if confirming something he'd hoped to be wrong about. "Likely left middle cerebral artery event," he said to the nurse and to me. "We need to move very quickly." They moved as if the action had been rehearsed, and of course it had. I read the steps later on a laminated card under glass at the nurse's station. Code stroke. One nurse started in Roman 4. Another drew labs, blood sugar, clotting times. Someone slid oxygen under her nose. A tech pushed a gray cart with a computer screen on an arm that reminded me of a curious bird. The screen flickered with an image that was not us yet. A login page, then a spinning wheel, then the halo of a video call trying to be born. "Teleneurology," the nurse said when she saw me watching. "Sure team." She said it like a prayer. A face appeared in a postage stamp on the screen, sleep must hair headset, a child's watercolor taped to the wall behind him. "Sure neurology," he said. "This is Dr. Menon." "Solstice Star Medical," Dr. Ibera said, stepping into view. "Female, 67, acute right-sided weakness, aphasia, last known well about 9:08. NIS maybe 12. CT?" Dr. Menon asked. "Negative," Ibera said, with a smile so small it was almost apology. "We don't have one." Menon's face shifted an inch toward sorrow and then back to work. "Okay, you've got TPA?" "Stocked," Ibera said, naming the drug like the answer to a riddle with a trap. "But no imaging to rule out hemorrhage." "And we are," Menon said gently, "in the middle of the Atlantic." A nurse read vitals low and urgent as if the words themselves could steady them. "BP 180/100, SATS 96, glucose 142. The math began. I could see it in the doctor's eyes, in the way the nurse looked toward the wall clock and then at her watch to triangulate a truth. TPA, the clot buster they teach you about in pamphlets, works best when given quickly, like hospital hallway quickly. It also requires proof you aren't bleeding already. On land, proof is a CT scanner away. At sea, proof is a helicopter and a helipad and a sky that agrees. Heli is 19 minutes from the Azores once airborne, the other nurse said, checking a laminated sheet with numbers for wind as if wind obeyed lists. Dispatch time 10 to 15. Weather? She looked at the wall, which was not a window, and at a little monitor that was. Gusts to 35 at the pad. Captain has the bridge, someone said from the door, as if to reassure us that this time even the ship knew to listen to its own doctor. I thought of the brochures that had called the medical center world class. The world is bigger than a clinic with 4 bays and a machine that prints an EKG tracing like a music staff for heartbeats. I am not ungrateful. They had competence. They had hands. They had speed. What they didn't have was a machine that would have turned a question mark into a plan. Callista watched all of this as if from behind glass. Every so often a word tried to ride her breath and failed to attach. She turned her face to me with a look I'd seen once in a hardware store when a cashier accused her of pocketing a tube of glue she'd actually set on the counter, hurt complicated by disbelief. She had never been a person to whom things happen. She did things. By 9:22, they had blood results. By 9:26, they had a blood pressure number Dr. Menon liked. By 9:31, the call for helicopter launch had gone out. ETA 19 minutes once airborne, the radio said again, as if repeating it would begin it sooner. The captain pointed the bow into wind, and you could feel the ship lengthen a bit, like a dog bracing into a gust. Out the tiny porthole in the staff break area, I could see Gray coming. "Here's what we're deciding," Dr. Ibarra said, sliding in beside me as if to hide the words from the air. "If we give altiplase without imaging and she's bleeding, we could make it worse. If we wait for the helicopter, we risk losing precious time. If the helicopter can't land, he didn't finish because he didn't have to." "How do people do this at sea?" I asked. "Usually they don't," he said. There was no bravado in him, only a careful honesty that made me want to hand him the ocean and say, "Fix it." Most of what we see is cuts, sprains, dehydration, chest pain that isn't a heart attack. This, he looked back at my aunt, is what keeps us awake. The helicopter did its part. It became air. It spun rotors above an airfield that might as well have been a fantasy and rose to meet a ship turning its mouth to wind. A new voice came over the radio. "Coast Guard 329 lifting. Give us your speed." The ship answered. You could imagine us from above, the only thing moving in a sheet of pewter. Crosswind 32 knots at pad. The deck chief called, his voice too even. Gusts 38. 19 minutes, the nurse whispered again to no one. Negative on approach, the helicopter said. We need wind under 25 sustained for safe set down. Can we hoist? Someone asked. Hoist requires stable hover, the helicopter said. And a rig. You do not have a rig. I can give 10 more degrees, the captain said. Any more and we peel the bow off. He did it anyway, because that is what you do when someone's life is stored in a packet labeled maybe. The sky answered with a burst of stubborn. The ship answered with another point and another. The helicopter flirted with the idea of landing and then confessed it could not. New plan, Dr. Menon said in our little metal room, the way a teacher announces a field trip detour and still tries to sound like the person you want to trust. Closest port? Distance, Ponta Delgada, the nurse said. 58 nautical miles. The captain pushed. The engines dug at the water like paddles. The floor thrummed. In the theater on deck 3, the 10 a.m. chair yoga session moved to the bar because the stage vibrated. Somewhere a child clapped because vibration feels like excitement when you are 3. Time is not a clock in a moment like that. It's a weight placed on a chest every minute you can't hand someone a machine that decides. Callista drifted, surfaced, drifted again. Her hand loosened and tightened on mine like tide. Every so often her mouth found a syllable that felt like a word, and she offered it with a look like see. Once, for 3 seconds that lasted an hour, her face evened and her fingers reached toward the brush kit she didn't have. And then the droop returned as if embarrassed to be gone. At 10:28, a young man from guest services came down with a clipboard, and the sort of careful smile you give people who have already had too much day. "We need a signature to authorize any air evacuation charges," he said. "In the event of," he glanced at the helicopter that didn't land. "Payment will be reconciled with your insurance." I signed the line that meant if a rotor met our air, we would owe a car. At 10:51, the ship eased into a channel with concrete shoulders. Buildings appeared like punctuation, low, white, square, arranged to say land. The captain said words like priority berth and medical transfer, and the ship, which had been performing crisis, slipped its rope across the bollard like an old animal lying down. The ambulance doors opened to a hospital that smelled like every hospital. An orderly took hold of the gurney. The crew let go so reluctantly their fingers looked lonely. Someone told me to ride up front. I followed instead because they weren't going to squeeze me out of this story. A registrar appeared at a sprint and asked for a name, a date of birth, an allergy list. I knew it. I knew all of it. It felt like cheating on a test I had studied for every day of my life. CT owns a particular sound, the machine whispering around a table, the person you love moving into a ring of information. They slid her in and out, the same gray image painted different slices of her head. A neurologist in a white coat with a coffee stain on the cuff found me in the hall. "We see an occlusion," she said. "Left macaw, we do not see bleed. Your time, you are outside the window for thrombolysis by minutes." She held her hands apart, as if showing me the thickness of the missed door. "We can attempt thrombectomy, mechanical retrieval. Interventionalist is on the way." "Do it," I said, which is the easiest sentence in the world when you do not have to wield the wire. They had an angiography suite 2 corridors over that looked like something out of science fiction, if your science fiction included white cabinets and a cross on the wall. They threaded a catheter up from her groin to a map of her brain that none of us had seen until now. On a screen, I watched ink become river and stop. The interventionalist murmured to her assistant the way musicians murmur when they hit a phrase they've practiced. Then, softly, there. A tiny claw, a fragment of clot, a wash of flow, a little more, then a little less. When they stopped, the clock Callista had more blood in the place she needed it, and also less time. The neurologist said words like reperfusion and collaterals and penumbra. She said moderate rescue. She did not promise what would come back. Recovery rooms are the same everywhere. A curtain where you want a door, a chair you can sleep in if you have to, a monitor that declares allegiance to noise. Auntie slept like a person who had survived a rainforest. When she woke, her eyes were new and old at once. I told her where we were, what day, what the ocean had done, what we had tried. She listened the way you listen to a joke you don't yet see. She formed her mouth around a word that might have been okay and found O instead. She made a face, ridiculous, and laughed with one side of her mouth. That laugh broke me more than the morning had. The ship sent a liaison who used the phrase, working with local partners, and then a separate liaison who used the phrase, guest care escalation. They brought flowers as if petals fix brain tissue. They offered to fly me home and her later. They asked whether I would like a partial refund or a future cruise credit, should you care to sail with us again. In the corner of the hospital room, under a window that made a square of Portuguese light on the floor, I wrote down everything. The times, the names, the 19 minutes that mattered, the 7 that did more. I drew a little map of a ship with an arrow to a helipad, and another to a room with a phone on a metal arm and a line that labeled itself want. Callista slept and woke and slept. Her right hand, her painting hand by training after 30 years of reteaching the world her leftness, began to remember a task. Her mouth began to hold a word like a finch you coax onto your knuckle. Sometimes the word stayed. Sometimes it panicked and flew. "Light," I said to her once, bringing her a plastic cup of water. "Lives where you don't look. and she rolled her eyes so gloriously I knew I had my aunt and a different one. And both, we stayed 7 extra days. Insurance argued with vocabulary while nurses changed Roman IV bags with hands that had mastered gentleness. A speech therapist named Beatriz taught my aunt tricks, singing to find speech through a different door, tapping a rhythm with a foot while a mouth seeks a sound. She gave me homework, too, patience on index cards. On our last afternoon, the neurologist came in with a stack of papers and a tone that meant truth. If you had been on land, she said, we likely would have given alteplase within an hour of onset, with imaging. With thrombectomy, we still might have needed. Your outcome could have been better. It could have been worse. This, she gestured at my aunt arranging her mouth around thank you and producing danku, is a rescue with scars. On the flight home, I wrote to the cruise line. I did not yell, though my hands wanted to. I wrote like I was talking to someone who could change a line item in a budget. Portable CT in the refit plan. A neurologist on call on every long crossing. A helipad policy that factors in the fact that wind does not read policies. I know none of these are easy. I know the math of money talks louder than the math of minutes until it meets a face. I am telling you this because brochures make everything a yes, because world class can fit into a room with 4 beds and a phone on an arm if everyone in it is as good as Ibarra and Menon, and the nurse with the laminated wind chart, and still not be the world you need in the hour you need it. Because danger does not always knock. Sometimes it sits next to you at breakfast, disguised as steam off a blue mug, and steals your aunt's mouth for an hour that is worth a field of light. When I visit Callista now, I bring flowers and paper and the cheaper brushes that forgive new grip. She paints slower. She speaks like a person learning to walk in a language. When she laughs, both sides of her mouth join hands. The first time she painted after the hospital, she chose a thing we'd both seen and never looked at as a subject. The helipad, the bow, wind barred into lines. She titled it 19 minutes. Then under that, in faltering letters, to port. If you're listening at sea and a voice on a speaker says the helicopter is 19 minutes away, you will feel the room lean toward rescue. You should. Lean hard. Bring the ship to meet it. But also learn the names of your doctors and ask what their phones can do. And bless the ones who tell you what they cannot. Carry your aunt's pills. Learn the city names for where you are. Know the simple tests and do them without embarrassment. Write down the time. And if someone offers you a phrase like world class, ask them where the nearest machine lives that turns a question into a yes, and how long it takes to get there when the sky says no. Sometimes the sea's worst danger beats under a ribcage. You count minutes, bargain with weather, and race a horizon you can't see. Then, if you're lucky, the clock loosens its grip and the ship exhales. But not every emergency fits in a clinic. Some arrive from above, wearing wind, and from below through the bones of the ship itself. New vessel, new latitude, same faith in steel and schedules. A glossy sky bridge arcs over twin pools like a ribbon, and everyone believes glass is just a view you can walk on. Then the ocean reminds us it doesn't sign waivers. Peripheral bands of a distant storm reach out like fingers, and a ship the size of a neighborhood steps off an invisible stair. Crowds become currents. Rumors outrun facts, and under a ceiling painted with constellations, strangers learn how to breathe together in the dark. Story 4. The night the pool walkway fell. We boarded the Emerald Tide under a sky so clean it felt ironed. The ship looked smug about it, gleaming decks, chrome railings polished to the point of vanity, a glass walkway arcing over twin pools like a ribbon that had wandered off a gift and decided to be architecture. The brochure called it the Sky Bridge. Everyone called it the selfie. I was traveling with my brother, Evan, and his daughter, Lucy, who had recently learned the phrase, best day ever, and used it with reckless optimism. We were tracing Japan's coast in late season, autumn light tucked into the waves like foil. The itinerary promised port towns with fish markets and rope-wrapped shrines, and enough ramen to make your bones remember they once had warmth. I had promised Evan that a week where someone else cooks counted as medicine. By the second afternoon, we knew the ship's rhythms. The noon steel drum show on deck 11, the espresso machine that hissed like a cat at 6:30 a.m., the chorus of sneakers on the running track when the sun steered itself down. The sky bridge became our landmark. It spanned the pools with panels thick as a fist and clear enough to see the water flashing below. People stood in the middle and forgot to keep moving. If you looked up from the atrium 2 decks down, you saw feet walking on sky and had the brief vertigo of being under ice. On day 3, the captain mentioned a storm he made sound like a rumor. A system well offshore, he said, the vowels smoothed by years of reassurance. We expect peripheral bands, nothing we are not designed to handle. He asked us to secure loose items on balconies out of an abundance of caution. A phrase that means a thing will happen and no one wants to be wrong about it after. You don't need a meteorologist if you have a barometer and a ship. The air got heavy with the specific kind of weight wind carries before it arrives. On the promenade, crew stowed the canvas cabanas and tied the deck chairs in bundles like hay bales. The sky bridge was roped off for cleaning, a fiction kind enough to be true. By sundown, the horizon had a smudge on it. By 9, the ship had a new soundtrack, subtle creaks in the joints, a bottle rattling against glass somewhere down a hall. Lucy fell asleep before the evening show. Evan carried her back to our cabin, her cheek pressed to his collarbone like it had been carved there when she was born. "It'll just rock a little," he said to me and himself. At 10:45, I went out on deck 11 alone, because I grow quiet when weather doesn't. The pools were shuttered under taut covers that made them look like they were holding their breath. Above them, the sky bridge hovered in darkness, its glass catching the occasional flash of a strobe light from a party someone had refused to cancel. Crew moved in pairs, not hurrying, but not strolling either. A lifeguard with a shaved head and a fluorescent whistle around his neck stood by the starboard pool, staring at nothing in the way you stare at a dog you think might run. A sheet of rain crossed the deck so suddenly, it felt like it had been waiting behind an invisible curtain. I ducked inside, past the towel station and the smoothie bar with its fruit tucked in like sleeping birds. The doors thunked shut just as a gust shouldered them. In the elevator, 3 teenagers laughed the kind of laugh that has nothing to do with humor and everything to do with pitch. By midnight, the ship's center of gravity felt curious. You can sense when the captain turns the bow into weather because the hum of the engine slides a half step and the floor becomes a gentle incline you swear is level. Door frames begin to argue with their hinges. Somewhere nearby, a room service cart became percussion. We tried to sleep. The bed behaved like a slow animal, lifting and settling with a patience that would have been comforting if it hadn't kept forgetting how far to lift. At 1:27, a mug fell in a cabin near ours and shattered with the crystalline drama only ship mugs have. At 1:41, the engine pitch changed again, and I felt the faintest lift in my stomach, the same flicker you get when a plane meets a pocket of sky that forgot to be air. "Still fine," Evan said in the dark. At 2:11, the world missed a step. It wasn't the usual seesaw, up the swell, over the crest, down the back. This was a subtraction. The hull rose obediently to meet something that wasn't there, and gravity remembered its other job. In that instant, everything not bolted down tried to be a bird. Our shoes flew under the desk. A tube of toothpaste went off like a tiny torpedo. Somewhere above us, something large slid and hit a wall and learned what its shape was. Then came the second part, the slam. The water caught us with the enthusiasm of a friend trying to fix a joke that didn't land. The ship banged back into the sea with a noise that reduced language to O. The ceiling lights dimmed, rallied, dimmed again. The power didn't die so much as doubt itself. The TV flickered to a menu screen that wanted to sell me shore excursions in cities we might never see. The intercom popped to life with a sound like a mic being tapped and then went shy. "Lucy," Evan said, and we both looked at the small nest of blankets where she should have slept through the apocalypse. She sat up, hair in her eyes, and said around a thumb, "Not best day." Another hit, less drop this time, more roll. We tilted starboard with intent. Everything in the cabin that had learned the word down now revised it to that way. Books slid. The closet door opened to let out our jackets and a sigh. Lucy's stuffed rabbit, Biscuit, hopped himself off the bed and across the carpet to the bulkhead where he waited for news. There's a noise a ship makes when it's under strain that I don't think you can fake in movies. A long, low protest from metal remembering it used to be mountain. It vibrates through bone. When the roll stopped at an angle that made walking into an act of faith, that noise deepened into a groan that told you exactly how many bolts were doing how much work. Then, from above, glass spoke. The sky bridge didn't break all at once. It started with small notes, the tiny tick of a hairline complaint, repeated, multiplied, like hail on a piano. Then came the sh-sh-sh-rack, the sound of designed confidence arriving at its limit. A series of thumps followed as tempered shards fell onto the pool covers and slid to the deck like cold rain. The whistle on the lifeguard's chest cut the air, 3 blasts, the sound of someone shaving seconds off disaster. Our corridor filled with motion. Crew members in life jackets moved against gravity like they'd been designing a ballet for this angle all their lives. "Stay in cabins," a voice commanded from the intercom, the words fighting through static. "Avoid exterior decks. We are experiencing heavy seas." On deck 11, a tourist, gray hoodie, sandals, a camera swinging like a pendulum, had been halfway across the sky bridge when the ship stuttered and the glass objected. He grabbed a handrail that suddenly didn't want to be a noun. A chunk of panel near the midspan cracked into opaque cubes. His knee slid into the opening and met air. The lifeguard with the shaved head was moving before physics finished its sentence. He didn't run. Running on a deck gone to angles is how you become the thing other people have to fix. He stepped, quick teleport steps, caught the strap of the tourist's backpack just as the backpack decided to remember the laws of momentum, and hauled the man up and over the discontinuity with a sound that was 3 parts grunt, 1 part prayer. Above their heads, the storm practiced playing the ship like an instrument. The covered pools sloshed underneath their tarp skins, the water shoving against its temporary ceiling, looking for a leak to argue with. Bar furniture skittered and clanked and then clung to a scupper like survivors. Somewhere, plates made showy, tragic exits. The ship listed again. The elevators shuddered into impotence with 2 people inside the one nearest us. They pressed the help button and yelled and then realized yelling wasn't a plan. A crew member shouted through the door, "Stay calm, we have you on the panel, we will come." Emergency lighting took over, inexact and red-tinged, the color of a heartbeat in a hand. That light does something to faces. It removes the performance of fine and leaves everyone human. Lucy's eyes went big and shiny. "Are we tipping forever?" she asked. "No," Evan said, with the faith of someone who knows you can't say yes. The ship knows how to stand up. We made a small camp in the corridor because the cabin door's swing had opinions. A woman across from us, silver-haired and annoyed, had a bleeding cut on her forehead the shape of the corner of a bedside table. I tore a t-shirt into strips while Evan pressed with the cleanest corner. A young housekeeper appeared with a first aid kit that had already been ransacked twice and replaced the t-shirt with proper gauze hands steady. Once stabilized enough for logistics, we were encouraged read, escorted to the theater midship, the most forgiving room on an unforgiving night. It was lower, closer to the ship's spine, and broad enough to absorb a lot of questions. People filed in like cards being shuffled. Crew parceled out seasickness bags with the solemnity of sacraments. A toddler somewhere found her voice and made a tunnel of sound through the murmurs. A man tried to joke about Dramamine and inventoried the injuries he did not have when no one laughed. On stage, a cruise director with the bravery to keep his name tag on spoke into the sound system like it was a spell. "We are safe. We are in heavy weather. Please remain seated or, if you are more comfortable, lying along the length of the row. Our team will bring water and blankets. If you require urgent medical attention, raise your hand and a crew member will come to you. This will pass. This will pass, the three most expensive words in hospitality. The rumors arrived like birds through an open door. We've lost an engine. We've lost two. We're taking on water. Deck 13 is flooded. Deck 5 is flooded. They're telling staff to pack bags. Every roomer had a cousin who swore their uncle worked in engineering. I watched the crew's faces more than I listened to the words. Their expressions held effort but not alarm. I learned to calibrate to that. Behind us, two teenage boys tried to make bravado out of fear. One said, "Dude, imagine if this was your first cruise." The other said, "Dude, this is my first cruise." They both looked briefly 8. Time behaves badly when you can't see the sky. Minutes stretch and then fold. I kept checking my phone like reception would mean control. The ship rolled less than before, and then more, and then less again. The worst of it wasn't the motion. It was the moments between the ship deciding which way to be. Crew passed through the aisles with trays of water and ginger ale. One of them, a young woman with a name tag that said Maria in block letters a child could read, carried a plastic bag of crackers like a relic. When she handed Lucy two, her hand shook a little. "For your tummy," she said, and Lucy offered her one back with the seriousness of treaty. Maria tucked it into her pocket like a talisman. At some point, the captain returned in our ears. His voice sounded 10 years older than it had that afternoon. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We are encountering severe seas on the edge of a weakening typhoon. The ship has sustained superficial damage to a section of the pool deck and the glass bridge. We have not lost propulsion. We have not lost steering. There is no breach below the waterline." You could feel the sentence hitting the roomer like a hand on a mouth. "We ask you to remain in the designated safe areas. We will update you again shortly." A man in the row ahead of us bowed his head and closed his eyes. I thought he was praying until I saw a line of drool run out of the corner of his mouth and realized he had finally, gloriously, given out to sleep. Bodies follow their own instructions. It is a peculiar intimacy to breathe together in a room with 2,000 strangers while a building rolls. You share heat and fear and the small comedian inside you that insists on pointing out the absurdity of trying to hold a paper cup steady on a tilted armrest. When someone cried out in pain, not for attention, but because pain announces itself, you watched a dozen hands lift and wave and point so a crew member could find them faster. When the lights flicked, the room inhaled and then didn't exhale until they returned, a unified diaphragm. At 4:03 a.m., after a roll that felt like a lesson learned, the ship's movement eased. Not stopped, no, but softened enough that people could reattempt vertical with a reasonable chance of success. The emergency lights warmed toward normal. An announcement informed us that essential services had been restored and that guest movement back to cabins would be phased. Crew stood at the exits, doing the delicate math of who looked steady and who needed the room's arms a little longer. Outside, dawn began without asking our permission. The storm had wandered off a few degrees to fuss at someone else. Wind still had teeth, but fewer. Rain thinned to spit. We made our way slowly, along corridors that had developed character overnight. Scuffs and damp patches and a toppled vase, the ship's makeup worn down to skin. On the pool deck, the sky bridge looked like the aftermath of a magic trick someone refused to admit had gone wrong. The metal spine remained, a graceful arc with empty sockets where glass should be. The panels had fallen into the pools, then slid under the covers to rest like stones under a river. Crew in harnesses moved with measured steps, sweeping and stacking and taping off wounds with bright ribbon. The lifeguard with the shaved head stood on the periphery, one palm pressed to a bruise on his elbow that would become a story later whether he liked it or not. The upper rails held shredded awnings like flags after a siege. Deck chairs were missing in the way teeth are missing, some forever, some waiting for a dentist. Where the storm had gotten its hands on the ship's pretty things, it had rearranged them into critique. We learned numbers. 8 with broken bones, mostly wrists and ankles from people who had tried to walk when walking wasn't the assignment. 1 with a concussion, under observation and indignant about her treatment by physics. Dozens with cuts of various ambitions. The medical center had been more crowded than a Black Friday sale, but they had worked through the line with triage that looked like kindness and was. When the sky allowed it, a helicopter arrived. Not the 19-minute emergency of our last story, but a practical evac for 2 serious cases and 1 crew member whose ankle said he'd be better at his job after a week on land. Watching the bird hover above a ship that had just learned the multiple meanings of steady felt like attending a graduation, an accomplishment you're glad to see and glad to be done with. In the afternoon, still a little wobbly, we lined up with everyone else and walked off the Emerald Tide into a port that had clearly not been expecting us for 2 more days. News vans had the ship's name misspelled on their graphics. The reporters asked questions like, "Were you scared?" And "What did it sound like when the glass broke?" And "Do you plan to cruise again?" Lucy, when a camera knelt to her height and held out a microphone-shaped banana, said, "The bridge went shrack." And the reporter's eyes got wet in a way that had nothing to do with journalism. The captain who, in daylight, looked like a person you could imagine laughing over a cup of tea, stood by the gangway and said variations of "thank you for your patience," a sentence that breaks a heart if you listen closely. The crew applauded the passengers as we left, as if we had done something noble by not making their hardest night harder. Many of us applauded them back, a useless, necessary thing. On the bus to the airport, I scrolled through my phone and found a photo from our first day aboard. Lucy, nose pressed to the sky bridge, the pool winking blue beneath her like a secret. In the photo, she is fearless because she has not yet learned what glass decides about stress. Evan leaned his head back against the window and closed his eyes. "If anybody asks," he said, "I'm going to say the best thing about cruising is how boring it usually is." "You going to say you'll never do it again?" I asked. He thought about it longer than was comfortable. "Probably I'll say I'll never do it again," he said. "Until Lucy is 11 and asks about the roller coaster on the ship with the robot bar and you talk me into it because you'll say, 'Storms are rare and now we know.'" "Now we know," I said, though what exactly felt like a lot. That night at home, my apartment made land noises, the polite hiss of radiators, the elevator's sigh. I woke once when a truck hit a pothole on the street below and the building shivered. For half a second, I was back in the theater, counting breaths with strangers, listening for the ship's next decision. Then the memory receded like a wave, like weather. I don't have a moral to sell you. If I did, it would be a cheap one, respect the sea. But respect is not enough. The ship was good, and the crew were better, and the ocean still reached into our glass and taught us about limits. Safety wasn't a speech. It was the lifeguard who didn't run and the housekeeper with the steady hands, and the captain who knew exactly how far to turn into wind without peeling the bow off. It was the way we sat under red light and didn't decide to be enemies. Sometimes I think about the sky bridge at dusk, empty, the panels back in place, everyone willing to trust the engineering again because that's what we do. We trust on purpose, with data and memory and the knowledge that things fail and often don't. I think about the sound of glass becoming weather and the whistle that cut through it and the moment the room shifted from many hearts to one. If you ever find yourself on a deck where the wind is rehearsing, look up. If you see a bridge of glass, admire it. Take your picture. Then look for the people in fluorescence, for the lines coiled and ready, for the tape in the lifeguard's pocket. Those are the things that matter when the night forgets itself. Those are the things that hold while you breathe together until morning. Steel held. Glass learned its limits. By dawn, the deck crews were sweeping glitter into bins, and the ship was already practicing its favorite trick, turning last night into a rumor. But not every failure is loud. Some don't fall from above, they rise from abundance, served on silver, shucked to order, passed hand to hand with a pair of shared tongs. New day, new danger. No wind to blame, no broken beam to point at, just a glossy buffet, a sign that says sea brunch, and a ship that will soon learn how fast hospitality can turn into triage. The tape that guarded the sky bridge becomes yellow rope around a seafood tower. The whistle becomes a nurse's name. And the crowd, last night a single breath in the theater, becomes a family around a window, holding hands, holding ginger tea, holding on. Pull up a chair. Not every storm lives outside the hull. Story 5. The family table. On the first night, they wrote our name on a little tent card and slid it into a silver holder like a flag stuck in victory. Table 41, Lie family, 14 guests. It sat by the window, just above the long slash of wake the ship left behind us like a signature. The maitre d', a woman with a jaw that could cut ribbon, tapped the card and said, "This is yours all week. Breakfast, dinner, lunch if you like. Families should have a home." We were a proper mess of a home. My grandmother, May, everyone called her Nai, was turning 72 and had declared she wanted to see water on both sides of a ship because in childhood it had only been on one. She wore a red silk jacket the first night and told every server it was her birthday, and also in a whisper that she was much younger than these liars say. My parents had organized the trip the way they organize holidays, by group chat and sheer will. My brother Daniel and his wife brought their 2 kids, who immediately fell in love with the soft-serve machine. My Auntie June came with a new boyfriend. We tried not to evaluate like judges. Uncle Ken brought his dominoes. We brought appetite and a promise to sit at table 41 together every evening like a family we kept meaning to be. The Serenade Arcadia sailed from Barcelona toward the Canary Islands, our itinerary a necklace of ports. Cadiz, Lanzarote, Funchal, back through Malaga and Valencia. The ship was one of those modern palaces that make you forget you're on water until a glass seems to tilt when it shouldn't. A 3-deck dining room spiraled around a chandelier that looked like a frozen fireworks bloom. Our table was in the mid-level tier, high enough to watch the show of other people being themselves, low enough to feel the hum of the hired quartet when they played Sway. Our head server was a man from Goa named Anil, who had the gift of remembering. On the second night, he remembered that Uncle Ken liked his soup too hot, and my cousin Abby's weird insistence on no sauce touching meat. By night 3, he began bringing Grandma a tiny dish of candied ginger with tea because she said it made the sea sit down. He was so good at anticipating that we allowed ourselves to stop anticipating anything at all. Day 4 was the sea day, the one that makes or breaks a cruise. The ship offered sea brunch in the dining room, long tables of things that would be ridiculous on land and feel appropriate only when surrounded by abundance on all sides. Carved prime rib before noon, towers of fruit that might as well have been sculpture. A parade of pastries, sugared as if hope were an ingredient. At the center near the windows, glistening on beds of crushed ice, sat a chilled seafood station that turned heads the way a bride's train does. Crab claws leaned in glossy stacks, shrimp curled like commas, oysters winked in their armor. A sign suggested lemon and restraint. A chef in a toque performed the ritual of creasing knives into shells and shucking. It was Nai who insisted. "What did we pay for?" she said, laughing, and tapped the toe of her sensible shoe on the marble. "I want to taste the ocean twice in one day." Annal hovered, concerned and polite. "Madam, we also have congee, steamed buns. Very nice pork siumai. My grandson is not waking before 10 to eat porridge," she said, and pinched Dan's arm. "We are on a boat. We eat like emperors." We ate like we were auditioning for a brochure. The crab was sweet. The oysters tasted clean to me, metallic to Auntie June. My father kept joking about a cardiovascular event by noon and then ate another prawn. The twins made temples out of lemon wedges. The quartet slid from Sinatra to Moon River, and Nai hummed with them, eyes closed, a hand on the table as if the wood needed reassurance. 2 hours later, my nephew Ethan complained that his stomach felt sour. He had been bragging about 3 plates of chocolate bread pudding. We blamed sugar and let him nap. That afternoon, as the ship wandered into a horizon that looked photocopied, my mother offered to take the twins to the magic workshop on Deck 5 and returned, pale, carrying Maya on her hip and Ethan by the shoulder. Maya had thrown up in the hallway outside the card room. My mother had apologized to 3 strangers at once and then yelped as Ethan vomited into a planter. We laughed, then stopped, because laughter wasn't invited to what happened next. By 5 o'clock, Daniel was on the floor of his cabin bathroom, forehead against the cool shower tile, bargaining with God or physics. At 5:15, Auntie June texted, "Where are you? I think I got food poisoning. PLS bring water." At 5:18, Uncle Ken messaged the family chat with a pirate flag for reasons we would never determine and then sent, "My stomach is a revolution." At 5:22, Nai tapped her cane against table 41 and said to Annal, "Do you have ginger tea? I think the ship is angry." She did not want to miss formal night. "I packed my dress," she said, rolling her eyes at my mother as if my mother had kept weather from her. She wore it at 6 anyway, a jade green sheath with a silver shawl that caught light like a net. At 6:08, she stood to greet a couple we'd met the night before, smiled, and then caught the back of her chair. Her face changed. It wasn't dramatic, it was smaller than that. A look like someone whispered a secret, and she realized, for the first time, the secret included her. "Hot," she said softly. "I am too hot." We took her to the ladies' room. I held her hand under the air dryer while my mother wetted paper towels and pressed them to her neck. When she began to vomit, it was with a stubbornness that looked like grief. We made a small fortress of ourselves with our bodies so she wouldn't be a spectacle. When she finished, she smiled at me with her practiced mischief, and it broke my heart because I knew she was telling me the story she wanted. I am still the person who jokes. At 6:23, the ship changed. You could feel it in the air before you heard it in the speakers. The cleaning carts multiplied like rabbits. Crew appeared in pairs wearing gloves the color of sunflowers. A disinfectant smell climbed the stairwells, chlorine braided with lemon until the scent became its own word. The music in the dining room hiccuped a second, then dropped 2 decibels, reverent. An announcement arrived, carefully wrapped. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain." Out of an abundance of caution, there it was again. "We are implementing enhanced sanitation procedures due to an increased number of reports of gastrointestinal illness. We appreciate your cooperation with hand-washing protocols and in-room dining suggestions this evening. Our medical team is here to help you if you feel unwell." People looked around at other people's mouths like mouths had become suspicious. A woman at a corner table pulled a scarf over her face as if fabric could negotiate with viruses. A man rolled his eyes and said something to his wife that included the word media, and then paled suddenly, stood, and hurried away. By 7, the line at the medical center curved along the corridor like a question mark that refused to stop asking. The waiting area overflowed with people practicing different strategies for discomfort: pacing, sleeping, groaning quietly, staring at a dot on the wall. Kids in pajamas clutched barf bags as if they were trophies and not truce flags. Crew offered those bags the way you offer Kleenex at a funeral. The medical center itself was exactly as big as it was going to be, no matter how many of us wanted it to expand by will. 2 doctors, 3 nurses, a closet with a safe full of medicines that felt like a magic chest and wasn't. They triaged with a grace that made me want to hug strangers. The elderly, the dehydrated, the feverish babies, the diabetic who had kept nothing down for 12 hours. They took blood pressures that wanted to be fables. They threaded Roman 4 lines with hands that had steadied 100 storms and still shook a little when they weren't looking. When it was our turn, around 8, Nai-Nai's lips were dry and she was swearing in Mandarin the way she only did when her pride had been tripped. Nurse Inez, a woman with a cadence that felt like home no matter where you were from, took one look and said, "We're going to get fluids in you, Mama, no arguments." And then to me, what did she have today? "Everything," I said. "Crab, oysters, shrimp, also wonton and congee later, and then, I think, a bite of lemon tart," she said, tasted like a too-clean kitchen. Inez reacted to oysters with a glance at the doctor that said more than a conversation could. Dr. Salgado, small and exact, ordered labs and an antiemetic. She examined with questions instead of panic, then drew up a plan on a clipboard because a plan, even a flimsy one, is a raft. "We're seeing a lot of this," she said, writing as she spoke. "Most cases resolve with supportive care. Hydration, time. With your grandmother, we're concerned about electrolyte loss and," she glanced at the chart, her hypertension. "We'll monitor until we're satisfied." By 9:30, the hallway outside the clinic smelled like bleach and humanity. People turned pale in public and sat on the floor as if floors could neutralize anything. At 10, a team in yellow aprons and goggles mopped as if they were trying to rephrase a bad sentence. At 11, the rumor machine went into production. "It's norovirus. It's the shrimp salad. It's sabotage from a competitor. It's God." Anil appeared not as a server but as a person with his hands clasped. He brought warm towels, ginger tea, the steadying attention of someone who knows he can't fix a thing and is going to stand there anyway. After midnight doctor, Salgado called me into the alcove where the printer lived. Her face wore a new line. "Her blood pressure is not our friend," she said. "She's dry in the way that scares me. Her stool is, we're concerned it's not just a virus. We've started antibiotics effective against common food-borne bacteria. If she doesn't respond, or if she drifts again the way she did 10 minutes ago, we need a hospital. The nearest port is Funchal," she said. "Madeira, we've already notified Port Health." It is surreal to watch competence assemble itself around someone you love, and also know that competence is a bridge to the thing you actually need. The captain's voice returned to the speaker above the triage desk. Calm again, older again. "We have coordinated with Madeira authorities and will expedite docking at 600 hours for medical transfer. Please remain in your cabins if advised by our staff. Our culinary team has switched to service, providing individually plated, high-heat items only." I understood later the recalibration those sentences implied. No buffets, no shared tongs, no towers of temptation. The thing cruises sell, the abundance and choice, was suddenly the problem. Table 41 waited under its chandelier like an empty stage. The card with our name on it stayed there all night, and RSVP the ship could not attend. At 4 a.m., Nai's hands cooled in a way I did not forgive. Her skin turned the color of paper that has lived in a drawer too long. The monitor complained in beeps that were polite and then not. Doctor. Salgado raised her voice once, just once, and people moved with double speed because tone is a key no one talks about in medicine and everyone carries. They hung a second bag of fluid and nudged a presser into the Roman 4 in whispers. Inez spoke to my grandmother like you speak to a cat under a bed. Come on, Mama, stay. We're going home later. You can yell at me then. At 6, we were in Funchal, the harbor curving like a hand under a bowl. Ambulances crowded the pier. Port health officers came aboard in jackets that said sawed across the back like a promise. They wore masks and practiced eyes. They moved quickly, zoning spaces like urban planners. Green for everyday sick, yellow for those being watched, red for those going now. Ships make you into a color. They took 8 passengers ashore on stretchers that morning, and a handful later by wheelchair. The dock smelled like diesel and disinfectant, and something sweet that might have been bakery air from the city waking up. When Nai left the ship, she looked very small on the gurney, but she lifted 2 fingers and made a little V like she was still playing tourist. And for a blink, she was my grandmother again, the one who winks when a joke finds her. Madeira General Hospital loved us with the bluntness of a place that does this for a living. We learned new words for the same fear: gastroenterite and desidratação and antibioticos. A doctor named Katarina with tired eyes and perfect posture told us most likely bacterial, possibly from cross-contamination, and not our first cruise, and we will culture, but supportive care is the medicine. She asked what Nai had eaten. We told her like confessing in church. On the ship, the investigation happened and did not. Port health officers toured the galleys that were usually hidden behind swinging doors that pretend to be smaller than they are. They took swabs and photographs and notes. Somewhere a manager practiced a sentence about standards exceeding industry guidelines. Somewhere else, the cold room inventory gave up its secrets to someone with a clipboard and a pen that worked. The dining room reopened the next night stripped of flourish. No towers, no glistening altars to rawness. The now familiar disinfectant smell had moved in like joint custody. Anil met us at table 41 with a softness that made me want to stand up and leave and hug him at once. He had a plate cloche on his tray. When he uncloshed it, it was a bowl of plain rice, a little dish of salted egg, steamed fish bright with ginger, congee thick as comfort. We made a menu for your grandmother while she is in the hospital, he said, for when she comes back. I don't remember eating much. I remember the empty chair at the head of our table glowing under the chandelier like a space the room had saved. I remember the way the twins whispered because the room seemed to ask for library voices. I remember Uncle Ken, who always knows a joke, saying nothing at all. Nai got better, the way bodies do when fluid returns to places that asked politely and then begged. She stayed in Madeira 4 days, long enough to learn the name of the nurse who braided her gray hair, long enough to make up a story about the handsome physician's assistant who was not her type and too young to waste on me. When she video called us the second day, still tethered to 2 plastic bags doing their quiet work, she rolled her eyes at the camera and said, "They do not let me go because they know I will go to the market for bolo do caco and make trouble." When she rejoined the ship in Malaga, crew lined the gangway like a greeting line at a wedding. People you never see, stewards from other decks, a woman from laundry with a tattoo of a swallow on her wrist, an officer with tired epaulets. Applauded like she'd won a game we hadn't known we were playing. The captain stepped down from whatever legal tower he usually lives in and held her elbow with a care that made me like him, even though I wanted to dislike him for how calm his voice had been. We returned to table 41 for the last 2 nights and treated it as a chapel. We didn't order raw food. We didn't order much. We filled glasses with ginger ale and told stories that got shorter and better as the telling improved them. We pointed out the sea to Nai like someone introduces you to relatives at a reunion. This is yours. It always was. On the final morning, a letter slid under our cabin door like a verdict. It contained apologies, the phrase enhanced protocols, a partial credit for disruption, and a request that we complete a survey. It did not say oyster or crab or cross-contamination or our fault. It did not say may lie. Annal brought another letter handwritten that did. For Mrs. Lie, when you are strong again, I will bring you ginger tea at a table that does not move. Annal. Back home, our kitchen table reclaimed us. We cooked rice porridges and 2 salty eggs and steamed fish the way the ship had, like a recipe for gratitude. Sometimes, on Sundays, we put out a small silver place card, holder we bought in a shop near the port, and slide a handwritten card into it that says Table 41, Lie Family. It's absurd and also the point. A family is something you name, and then keep naming even when a ship forgets your nouns. There are people who will tell you this story is about how unwise it is to eat oysters at sea. Maybe you can build a sermon out of anything. I think it's about systems and luck and what breaks when abundance is your brand. A buffet is a good idea until it isn't. A table is a table until it becomes a triage desk. A ship is a city until it needs a hospital, and then it sometimes isn't enough of one. It's about a nurse who called my grandmother Mama without irony and made room for her pride and her fear in the same sentence. It's about a server who learned our drinks and then learned our weeping faces and didn't run. If you take anything from Table 41, take this. Wash your hands more than the sign asks. Ask a question that sounds rude and is not, like, how long has that been on ice? Or, can I have the cooked version? Tip the person who brings you congee because it is worth more than a tower of shell. Write down the names of the people who help and say them in your kitchen later. Keep a little card with the word home on it and put it where you can see it, even if the room is moving. And if you ever meet a woman in a jade green dress who winks before she laughs and tells you she is younger than her passport claims, bring her ginger tea and do not argue with her about oysters. She already knows the ocean. She knows where it stops and where a table begins. Last night, the ship learned how abundance can bite back. A tower of ice turned into triage, and a family made a chapel out of a table number. But not every hazard rides in on a lemon wedge. Some don't touch your hands at all. They touch your habits. New day, new promise. No lines, no signatures, no keys to lose. Just a blue bracelet with a smiling dolphin that opens doors, pours drinks, and remembers you even when you'd rather it didn't. Yesterday's lesson was simple. Cook it hot, wash your hands. Today's is trickier. What opens when you don't touch it, and who else hears your yes? Keep your PIN, keep your latch, and listen for the difference between convenience and consent. Story 6, The Dolphin Key. They handed it to me at check-in like a friendship bracelet that could pay my bills. Welcome aboard the Arcadia Wave, the agent said, looping a pale blue band around my wrist. A tiny silver dolphin sat flush in the silicone, nose up as if catching a ride on my pulse. Your dolphin key, cabin access, payments, photos, even show reservations, totally hands-free. It felt like a toy, which is how you sell a lock. I was traveling with my younger sister Lena to mark the 1-year anniversary of a thing we don't name out loud anymore. She thought a cruise would be easy joy. No choices beyond beef or fish, starboard or port, late show or bed. I thought I could make my brain quiet by pointing it at a horizon that hadn't been rearranged by grief. We both overestimated boats and bracelets. The Arcadia Wave was one of those ships that thinks it's a small city. There were neighborhoods, an indoor park with gravity-defying plants under a skylight, an alley of dessert cafes that smelled like someone had hired memory as a chef, a theater shaped like your grandparents' idea of glamour, screens everywhere, menus, schedules, pictures of people laughing at things no one laughs at on land. And then there were the dolphins. Not real ones. Logos, the same little smile on elevator panels, bar taps, towel stations. Every time I tapped my band, a soft chime replied, as intimate as a door saying your name. By day 2, I had become lazy. No more digging for a card. No more signing. You stand in a line, the line assigns you a drink, the dolphin approves. The bracelet opened our cabin before I touched the handle. Once I walked past a camera near the theater, and later found my face in the ship's photo app already arranged into collages I hadn't asked for. Frictionless, Lena said, wiggling her fingers like a magician. It started small, a charge I didn't make. 2 ginger ales and a bag of pistachios at a pool bar I hadn't been near. I thought it was a typo, bar staff keying the wrong guest. Guest services reversed it with a smile. Happens, the agent said. The system is very busy on embarkation day. That night, I woke to the soft chirp of our lock accepting something, not opening, just greeting. The latch was engaged, so the handle pressed and stopped. I lay there, listening to my breath not betray me. Second chirp, the pause that means a decision. Then retreat, footsteps trying to remember how not to sound like footsteps. In the morning, the Dolphin Key app showed an entry at 03-14-02. The log listed it as guest. I held my wrist up to it like I could cross-examine a silicone grin. I hate this, Lena said, when I told her over coffee. I hate that we have to decide whether we hate this. We went to security with the time. The officer was kind the way tired people are kind. He tilted the screen in my direction. A grid of doors, green dots for closed, blue dots for open. The latch did its job, he said. We'll add surveillance to your corridor tonight. So we crafted a compromise with paranoia. We wedged the door. We looped a tiny alarm on the handle that would shriek like a kettle if lifted. And we kept on pretending vacation into existence. We did trivia. We let a teenager paint dolphins on our nails for charity. We walked under a ceiling painted like a night sky and laughed at the idea that paint could be more faithful than weather. On day 3, a man in a branded polo intercepted us outside a kiosk advertising Dolphin Key Plus upgrades. He had a badge that said Experience Tech, Owen, and a haircut that promised you could trust him with your router. You haven't personalized your bands yet, he said. Want me to help? You can set gestures, double tap to open cabin, triple tap to favorite a photo. Oh, and you can opt into location-less service so we can find you a chair by the pool before you even ask. What's location-less? I asked. He grinned. Our term for location-aware, he said, but without the creepiness. He held out a tablet. The app showed our names with tiny dolphins swimming around them. Below that, toggles, door auto unlock on, hands-free payments on, photo auto tag on, improve guest experience bold on. A little gray link said privacy preferences. I tapped it and landed in a paragraph about anonymized insights that felt like a shrug. We're good, I said, giving him a not now smile. He held it resilient. See you around, he said like a promise or a threat. That afternoon, I noticed someone watching us. Not obvious, not the movie version, just a stranger whose head seemed to angle when ours did. He was mid-50s, in a Hawaiian shirt with boats cruising across it as if eager to escape. He sat 2 rows behind us in the theater. He wandered the same side of the promenade. He was near the gelato stand when we bought mango cups and looking at the miniature pastries when we passed the cafe again. It could have been coincidence. Boats aren't big when you measure them by the shape of your day, but the coincidence kept choosing us. At dinner, the app glitched. Our table showed a reservation for 2, Ray plus guest, at the steakhouse, which we hadn't made. I didn't do that. Lena said. When we arrived, the host smiled at the dolphin screen. Good to have you back, she said. We have your preferred booth. Back. The words felt like a hand on my back that wasn't there. We have a reservation at the main dining room, I said, trying not to sound like someone who sues. We didn't book this. The host's smile faltered. It's been busy, she said. Sometimes the system carries over preferences from a previous sailing if there's a profile match. Previous sailing? I repeated. The meal log had a date from last month in it. Same name, same cabin type, same preferred booth. Not me, not this ship either, a sister ship. The host promised to raise a ticket with the vendor. We went to our assigned home, table, and ate spaghetti while trying to decide whether the word vendor should reassure or ruin. The bracelet chimed softly when I passed a shop window because the window knew I had looked at a bag online the night before. I felt my face warm the way your face warms when a stranger calls you by a nickname. This is what you do for a living, Lena reminded me, half teasing. I do. I'm a data privacy analyst for a hospital network. I build dashboards that help humans understand they're not surveillance-worthy and then fight the parts of the system that keep disagreeing. Yes, I said, and I don't wear them. The second night knock came at 03:11. The alarm on the handle squealed. The footsteps retreated fast enough to register the word guilty. Security came with apologetic urgency. They checked the lock log. 2 failed attempts, the officer read. 1 with an invalid token, 1 with a test credential. He frowned. We shouldn't see test at all. Test like QA test? I asked. Like vendor, he said, just as his radio bleeped, just as a page from somewhere deep below us demanded his names. Morning brought stranger charges again. Coffee for 2 at a deck cafe we'd never woken early enough to find. A rental for a snorkel set in a port we hadn't reached. Guest services wiped them. The agent's smile had serrated edges now. It's tides, she said. Glitches come in waves. We went to the aft pool to be ordinary. The wind flirted with the flag. The bartender with the galaxy tattoo filled a cup with ginger ale like I was fragile glassware and set it in front of me without asking. You're watching me, I said. She nodded. Long week for the dolphins, she said, tapping my band with a fingernail. People keep showing up places they weren't, or their shadow does. What's a shadow? Lena asked. She tilted her head toward the ceiling camera. If you walk past a thing and it recognizes you as a profile, it might greet you. But sometimes the system guesses wrong and invents someone you get to be. How many someones? She shrugged. Enough for security to drink their coffee hot for the last time yesterday, she said. Then she lowered her voice. We had a guy last sailing, wore a lanyard from the experienced tech team who kept helping people fix their bands. They found him carrying a stack of bands he said were lost. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Owen? I asked before I could stop my mouth. She didn't answer. She wiped the bar in a circle and made the cloth hesitate at the edge, the way you hold a thought and don't say it because of paychecks. That afternoon, I went to the privacy preferences in the app and turned off everything I could find. Auto tag, auto open, auto anything. I set a numeric PIN I had to tap into screens like I was defusing a bomb, 4 digits that felt both insufficient and like an act of faith. Then, because I am embarrassing to vacation with, I visited guest services and asked for my data export. We don't do that, the agent said, which was true in most worlds and not in mine. I thanked her, smiled my compliance, and then said, gently, you do if you comply with Maritime Privacy Regulation number 12B, or you can just let me talk to your privacy officer, who is either the ship's doctor or someone who reports to hotel ops. She stared, surprised to be caught between a person and a paragraph. Then she produced a pink slip where I could enter my email. "Allow 30 days, she said. "I'll be home in 7, I said. "I'll still be mad in 30. That night, after a show with an ABBA medley and a tap dancer whose shoes were as loud as his grin, our cabin door was unlocked. Not pushed, not tested, unlocked. We knew it because we'd started taking pictures of the latch when we left, date, time, post it with our initials, and the picture timestamp said 2112, and now the latch sat returned to base like a scolded kid. Nothing in the room looked disturbed, nothing obvious. But the tidy felt too tidy, the way a hotel room feels when housekeeping has obeyed gravity too perfectly. Lena's makeup had organized itself into a ceremony. My hairbrush sat teeth up like a bar of metal. We went to security with our pictures, our time stamps, our mad. The staff captain met us, a woman who looked as if she had once said the right thing in a storm and the ship still trusted her because of it. "You are not the first," she said, after hearing us out. "We are looking at the vendor. We have disabled hands-free door open shipwide for the night. I am sorry that we are learning this way." "What exactly are we learning?" I asked. "That convenience," she said carefully, "is not a plan." I slept in socks and a sweatshirt like I think cotton can negotiate with fear. At 02:07, the corridor shook with footsteps and then became that particular silence that says people are listening. At 02:09, a message appeared on my phone. "Ray, check your photo gallery." The sender ID was a string of numbers that could have been a cabin phone or a prayer. The gallery, a place I had ignored because I avoid photos of myself if I can, had a new album I hadn't created. Guest memories, training, 12 photos. Me and Lena at the rail, laughing into wind. Me buying mango gelato. Me doing the universal laugh of someone who has been asked to dance in a public space and said no and got pulled in anyway. Each image was time-stamped for days and times we hadn't visited those spots. In 2, I was wearing a dress I do not own. Except it was me, or close enough for an algorithm that prefers faces to women. "What is this?" Lena whispered, half question, half indictment. The last image was a picture of our cabin door, not opened. Just a picture taken from 3 feet away as if to check in with a friend. I called security. The line rang once and then changed its mind. Then my phone rang back. "Don't leave your room," a voice said. The voice had the accent of people who grew up near rain. "We are trying to catch someone who thinks he's clever. Stay put." "Who is this?" I asked. "Someone who doesn't like dolphins," he said, and hung up. At 02:22, the power flickered. The emergency lights came up, the same more red than white from the theater the night the Sky Bridge failed on a different ship in a different story. The PA crackled into a sentence that forgot itself halfway through. We felt the engines change personality. And then, from the hall, a particular flavor of panic. Crew voices moving on the double and guests becoming rumor. We opened the door an inch. Across the corridor, 2 men in polo shirts were already there. When I recognized Owen, when I didn't. They each had a neat zipper pouch and the posture of people who perform competence. Owen saw our door move and did that small startle that betrays a person who expected no witnesses. The other one nudged him down the hall, toward the service stair, with a shoulder that looked friendly and wasn't. "Do not follow," the staff captain said behind us, because she had arrived without me noticing and had the gift of knowing when people would do the unwise thing anyway. "Please, MS Solis. You know my name," I said. "You told it to my database when you bought a ginger ale," she said and grimaced. "I'm working on the part where that stops being true." We watched what watching people look like when there's nothing else to do. Security moved without fanfare, 2 up the stair, 1 to the next landing, 1 to the hinge of a door that had a seam you only saw if you carried a certain key. The lights remembered their real color and turned it on. A child cried because power is an emotion when you're small. Somewhere a blender tried to resume its last job and then gave up because even appliances understand their moment. At 02:37, they had someone. We didn't see cuffs. Cruise ships dislike spectacle the way house cats dislike leashes. But we saw a figure with a polo and a lanyard that had been taken off, and a face that tried a shrug and landed on nothing. We saw a pouch on a table in the corridor between us, unzipped and removed from story. Inside the pouch, a stack of bands backed with paper, each dolphin scuffed with the wear of trust. A phone in a case that had a slot for a thin rectangle you would only recognize if you already knew what it was. A tablet with a screen that showed a cluster of dots moving on a map of Deck 10 like fireflies under glass. And then, on the tablet, for a moment before someone laid a hand across the screen, our names. Ray Solis, Lena Solis, our dots, our cabin number, a column titled Assists, a number we did not understand and then did, 7. The staff captain saw our eyes go to it and stepped between the truth and us. "We have it," she said. "You need to let us do the thing we do." "What is the thing you do?" Lena asked, because she is braver where I am careful. "Keep the ship running," the captain said, "and then write letters." In the morning, an email arrived. Not the export I had gently demanded. This was too fast for compliance. A shorter note from guest privacy. "We are aware of an incident involving your profile," it said. "We believe a contractor misused internal tools to create training profiles, fictional identities built from elements of real guests. These were then linked to active tokens." The words sat like stones. "We have disabled training mode fleet-wide." It continued. "We have confirmed no financial loss to you. We regret the intrusion." A second note from security. "We recovered property bearing your image from a personal device," it said. "We would like to know if you wish to pursue action with authorities at our next port." I pictured the man in the corridor with his knot cuffs and his practiced haircut. I pictured the bartender with the galaxy tattoo and the way her hand had hesitated at the edge of the cloth, the way people with fewer choices do math about what they can afford to say. I pictured the dolphin icon engraved on acrylic by the elevators, the smile you can't not see. We chose yes. At the port, 2 officers with the kind of bored professionalism you want in your laws took statements. The ship gave them a pouch, a spreadsheet, a regret. We gave them the snapshots of our lock and the screenshot of the midnight reservation we hadn't made, and the photo album we hadn't curated of a life we hadn't lived. That afternoon, as if the ship needed to prove it could still do fun, there was a parade on the promenade. Crew in costumes waved. Children danced with the willing clumsiness of joy. The dolphin logo bobbed on balloons and stamped itself into cookies and grinned from foam fingers. Lena bumped her shoulder against mine and made a face somewhere between "you win" and "I'm sorry." "What do we do with this?" she asked, nodding toward my wrist. "We tell it what it can have," I said, and opened the app again. I found toggles I'd missed. Require PIN for every transaction. Prompt at door. Disable facial auto-tagging. Delete captured faces. Some were grayed out with the universal message software uses when it has already decided. Coming soon. "Maybe we tell it no," Lena said quietly. We went to the guest services desk one more time and asked for old-fashioned keys. The agent looked over both shoulders and then under her desk and produced 2 plastic cards that might as well have been brass. "We are not supposed to issue these unless the band is broken," she said, and then, seeing my face, "Let's call yours broken." That night, the door opened only for contact that felt like a choice. The bracelet sat on the desk, turned face down like a pet who'd misbehaved and was embarrassed. We slept, and the only knock we heard was the ship tapping its hull against a low swell, the kinder noise boats make when they remember history. 2 weeks later, at home, a proper export arrived, as promised and too late to help. A CSV with columns that made me wish I could hold my breath longer. When, where, which door, who authorized, why. The why column always said guest experience. In a separate email, the cruise line updated its policy. No hands-free door opens between midnight and 6. Default PINs switched to on. A new privacy dashboard added to the app that was either meaningful or branding. The vendor lost its contract. The ship sent us a future cruise credit with a number large enough to sting and not enough to forget. Months later, Lena and I sat at a pier cafe in a city where boats came and went like moods. We wore watches we bought in cash. We had paper tickets in a folder. Teenagers walked by with bands in bright colors like summer refugees. I want to believe in easy joy, Lena said, picking the sugar off a pastry like snow. I want to trust the part where someone hands me a blue bracelet, and it just means I don't have to dig in my bag. You can, I said. You just have to decide who else gets a chair at your table. What do you mean? This, I said, tapping my wrist where the dolphin ghost tingled. Every time the thing works, someone else has a seat. Vendor, system, staff, maybe the wrong man in a polo. You can let them sit quietly and keep refilling your water. Or you can look right at them and say your name and your rules. She laughed a little. You're still you. Yes, I said. And I like doors that remember no. If you're watching this on the ship, with a bracelet humming your name to 100 small pleasures, don't panic. Panic is useless theater. Ask 3 questions instead. What opens when I don't touch it? Who else hears when I say yes? And what is the smallest switch I can flip to make a stranger do a little more work? Use a PIN if the system will let you. Turn off the parts that label your face without your consent. If they'll give you a card, take it. If not, learn your latch and your alarm. Write down the times. If someone in a polo wants to help, let them help while you look at their badge and then go to a desk with a real name on it and write down that too. None of this makes you paranoid. It makes you the kind of animal that still exists because its ancestors paid attention. The dolphins will keep smiling. That's their job. Your job is to decide who they're smiling at. We learned to lock what can't be held: names, faces, doors. We taught convenience to say please and made a bracelet ask for a PIN. But not every danger is a stranger with a toolkit. Some don't slip in when you're asleep. They arrive when everything you trusted to hum forgets how. Tonight, it won't be about who can open your door without asking. It'll be about what happens when nothing opens at all. The dolphins stop smiling. The apps stop promising. And a ship that sold itself as a city has to remember it's a boat, with rails, with lungs, with people who become light for each other. Phones down, hands out, breathe together. When the grid blinks, the only passwords that work are please, here, and help. Story 7, Black Hour. The Elysian crown was best at pretending the sea didn't exist. It did this with carpets, with chandeliers that looked like upside-down forests, with a soaring atrium where a glass elevator rode a chrome spine, and a pianist played standards soft enough to be mistaken for air. It did it with menus and trivia and the exact temperature of the hot tubs. If you stood in the right place midship and squinted, you could convince your inner ear you were in a mall someone had taken too seriously. I'd booked the crossing because I wanted a week where decisions were costumes. Beef or fish, window or aisle, early show or late. I'm a production stage manager by trade. My hands know the weight of a headset the way some people know the weight of a wedding ring. My last show had closed like a fist. The run was good, the ending wasn't. I needed a place where someone else called places, and I could sit in the dark and clap at the right time and let applause be enough. On the second night, I learned the ship's clock. The Riviera Lounge show turned over at 8:30 sharp with a horn flourish you could set your watch by. The dining room's second seating would be an uneven wave at 8:45, the kind that leaves napkins on floors like petals. By 9:10, the pianist moved from Ellington to Moon River, which is cruise industry for would you like another drink. At 9:17, flicker. Not a power dip you dismiss as personality. A measurable wink, the sort of thing that turns heads like a rumor. The pianist didn't pause, pros never do. But the note he hit was a fraction late, the way you laugh a beat after everyone else when a joke takes the long way around. At 9:18, I realized I was counting. Flicker again at 9:19, 13. Longer. A subfloor thud like a swallowed cough. I was at the atrium rail, watching people go where they go when they aren't being watched. A little girl in gold sandals twirled. Her dress caught the air like a bell. A couple in their 70s walked with their elbows touching, the pace of a secret. A bartender with a galaxy tattoo on her wrist, stars and spirals that migrated when she flexed, polished a glass with a cloth that didn't need to be that clean. At 9:21, a crew member in a navy polo with epaulettes and a flashlight clipped to her hip stood at the edge of the bar and watched the ceiling. She had the face of someone who had once said the right thing at the right second and been rewarded with a career. I'd seen her before, staff captain. I'd learned. The person second only to the man who took all the photos with children on his lap. She traced a line with her eyes from the atrium's lighting truss to the far exit and then down toward the tiles, a path I recognized. What happens when the lights forget themselves? I felt it before I heard it, the way a room goes quiet under a laugh track. A pressure, a decision gathering. At 9:22:03, the ship went blind. There's dark that admits it's ornamental, the kind in theaters, the kind you dim on a dimmer board like a hug. And then there's the kind that arrives when electricity gives up its hands. The first kind wraps you, the second erases you. Everything vanished. Sound survived. A glass hit tile and made a fireworks of itself. Someone laughed the way people laugh to choose not to scream. The pianist, God bless him, let both hands fall to the keys and made a cluster of notes that became a chord that wanted to be blue and green and wasn't. Then, the hum we'd all stopped hearing because it had always been there, the low, patient thrum of the engines, stuttered and dropped a note, like a singer remembering a lyric and then not. Emergency lights didn't snap on. There's a hierarchy to power, main, emergency, battery. The first two had clearly been asked a hard question and refused. For a breath long enough to cover a room in decisions, we were on the last. Then, in the ceiling, little squares you would never have noticed if you weren't paid to notice, pulsed red. Not sufficient. Not for a space this tall and this soft. The red pulled everyone into relief, nose, cheekbone, the whites of eyes that weren't white anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice tried to be born in the air, then wasn't. The PA's pre-chime made it to the first syllable and gave up. Somewhere far below, something heavy slid 6 inches and learned its shape the hard way. From the piano came a voice, not played but made. "It's okay," the pianist said. "We've got light on the way." He said it like it was a lyric we all knew. We didn't, but we took his optimism like a coat we could share. As breaths settled into pairs and trios, the staff captain's flashlight clicked. Not a phone light, an actual torch with aims. It carved a strong triangle across the floor and caught faces the way a headlamp does at a campfire. "Crew to positions," her voice arrived, not through a speaker but through lungs. "Guests, please remain where you are. If you are near stairs, step back from the edge. We will come to you." A man laughed from the mezzanine. It wasn't humor, it was air escaping a long-held plan. "Remain where we are," he said to no one and everyone. "Where is that?" "Deck 5, midship." A woman answered in a voice that had introduced craft projects to classrooms and solved disputes over glitter. "You're on deck 5, midship. Names matter in the dark, so do pronouns." I had a headlamp in my bag because old habits are useful. I slipped it on and clicked it to its lowest setting. A single, narrow cone of white. It felt obscene. I covered it with my hand and let the light leak between my fingers. The beam landed on a young couple clutching a stroller on the atrium's far side. The baby didn't cry. Babies can teach you about a space faster than you think. There were bangs in the elevators. Not screams, thank God. Just palms against glass, tentative at first, then with the growing rhythm of people who want strangers to know they exist. Sabrina, a voice 2 feet from my shoulder, cut through the room to a different room in a different year. You work backstage, right? I turned. It took a second for the voice to find its owner in my little light. Purple hair shaved close, nose ring catching red, Marta from the afternoon trivia, the one who'd hung around after with a question about whether mic cables are allergic to salt air. Stage manager, she said into my hesitation, pointing at my headset like I wore it on vacation. You said. I nodded. Yes. She pointed toward the elevator bank. My partner's in there. They're not freaking, but I'm going to. Hold this, I said, handing her the headlamp and moved toward the banging. Crew were already there. A stocky man with hotel ops embroidered over his heart pressed his palm against the glass and spoke 2 words into the elevator like a benediction. We know. A housekeeper in sneakers squatted with her back against the closed doors and stared up the seam as if could make metal forget how it wants to be. The staff captain arrived behind them, her flashlight becoming command. You know the handbrake? She asked the hotel ops man. He nodded, the kind of nod that recognizes a thing from training and praise to meet it as well in life. She turned to the housekeeper. Get me a team for stairs 12 and 14, she said. We'll walk people down who can walk. I lifted my hands. I'm a passenger, I said, in case the next thing I said needed that disclaimer. But I'm a stage manager. If you need someone to move people or calm them. Good, she said without looking at me. Take that side of the rail. Anyone heading for stairs, tell them we're escorting. No one moves alone. No one runs. If you see anyone with mobility aids or oxygen point, they go first. I set my mouth around the word copy and didn't say it. Civilian, not crew, but work is work and a hallway is a hallway. I moved to the rail and became a sign with knees. Everyone, listen, I said, a theater voice without the theater. We're going to move you in groups to the stairs. Hold the rail. Phones down. If you have a light, keep it low. We're going to go slow and safe. If you need extra help, raise your hand. Hands rose, more than I expected. The dark draws honesty out of people in a way light doesn't. A woman in her 60s lifted a portable oxygen concentrator that beeped in letters. A teenage boy lifted his fingers, then lowered them, then lifted them again and said, I have panic attacks, like he was confessing to littering. A man in a suit held his wife's hand so carefully anyone could see the pain in it. I started counting. Not because anyone asked me to. Because counting is a way to open a door when there aren't any. You, I nodded at 3 travelers in sneakers, and you, with me, you next. We'll get you all. No one is being forgot. We made a human chain to the stair. The red glow turned faces into the kind of portraits you see in museums and pretend you understand. I put one hand on the rail and the other out behind me, and we walked. Somewhere above us, a wine glass rolled from a table and hit a riser and fell and broke with precision. Our footsteps learned a rhythm over carpet that had been designed to hide spills. On the landing, we found a woman sitting on her suitcase, white knuckles, jaw working like she'd meet the dark halfway. You're okay, I said, the lie we tell in order to make it slightly truer. Down we go. Bathroom? She whispered. We'll find one, I said, and her breath hiccuped into a laugh. On deck for the air was different. It tasted like lemon and ocean and a tiny lick of copper. Behind a metal door with a white sign that said watertight in serious letters, something churned. Engine room, I guessed. Below us, men in coveralls were making bargains with systems older than the logo on the napkins. A smell of ozone threaded in a scent like rain deciding whether to happen indoors. "Keep moving," a crew member said behind us in a voice that was kind and made no space for disagreement. "Don't stop. Don't look for the elevator. It is resting." We loaded the first group into the Riviera Lounge. Lower deck, fewer windows, a room that had earned the right to call itself a haven by having a ceiling. Candles flickered along the edge of the bar, real ones, stolen from a specialty restaurant, the kind you don't use around curtains unless you have to. Behind the counter, the Galaxy tattoo bartender poured water into paper cups like a liturgy. "Sip, not chug," she said softly to each person. "Your stomach will riot if you go too fast." A boy in a Captain Underpants t-shirt stood on a seat and announced, "I am in charge of handing out napkins." His 5-year-old authority steadied 2 rows of grown men. I went back up, down, up again. The atrium had learned to be a church, pews of carpet, hush of people not believing in the same thing and doing it anyway. The elevator doors had been pried 1.5 inches, enough for fingers and air. A flight attendant from somewhere in row 17 of an airline none of us could pronounce knelt and talked through the gap. "You're okay," she said. "It's boring, I know. Here is a story about a dog." She made one up. It was terrible and perfect, and the elevator stopped sounding like a human drum. At 9:37, the PA tried and failed again. I watched the staff captain listen to the nothing and adjust a dial in her head that might have been labeled patience. It's not the big disasters that prove people. It's the small refusals of systems to be what they promised on a Tuesday. On the 3rd trip down, a man in a bright shirt bumped my shoulder hard enough I saw sparks. "Watch it," he said, "no please," like we were moving through a grocery store and the pineapple display had offended him. I turned to stare, and in that exact moment his hand slid into my back pocket. I don't know what reaction he expected. Shock, maybe, or the kind of attention that forgives intention. Instead, I grabbed his wrist the way you grab a cue line going wrong, thumb under, fingers over, straight to bone. "No," I said. "Hey," he began, indignant, practicing a defense, and then his face did a math that included my forearm and the set of my shoulders and the number of people around us who could see him, and he modified his plan. "Misunderstanding. You're going to walk with me," I said, and walked him to the nearest person in uniform and introduced him as if he were a volunteer for a magic trick that wasn't about to go well for him. The staff captain didn't ask questions. She put him with a pair of crew under a red light that made judgment look ceremonial and nodded me back into the current. The lesson encoded itself. Some people cannot keep their hands still when the lights go out. The dark reveals the training our bodies have had. At 9:41, the emergency lights got brighter by something like a fraction, which felt like a story moving toward its middle. A man in a suit in the front row of the lounge insisted on telling anyone who would listen that he used to work in insurance and knew all about aggregate risk. His wife patted his arm with a hand that said there. An elderly woman with a low bun and a steady mouth took a deck of cards out of her bag and began dealing patience by design. "Solitaire," she announced to no one, and 5 people watched her shuffle like it was theater. At 9:48, the staff captain got a radio message that arrived as one word. "Smoke." "Where?" she said in the same tone you use when someone tells you the cake isn't done yet. "Let's check with a toothpick." "Galley 2. Burned pan. Out." A pause. "Copy. Out." She closed her eyes and opened them with a look I've worn at so many Q2Qs the expression might as well be on my passport. The part of calm that is muscle, not faith. She climbed 2 steps and turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, lungs only, "we have had a failure in our main electrical distribution. Our emergency generators are coming online one by one. They don't like to be woken like this, so they are taking their time. We have no indication of a fire. We have no indication of hull breach. You are safe in this space. Stay with us. We will bring the lights back. She did what good stage managers and captains do. She drew the outline of a box and then made it factual with her mouth. People sat stiller. The man with the insurance converted his lecture into a nap. Someone started a soft hymn that didn't make my teeth itch. A teenager in a hoodie took off his hoodie and put it over the shoulders of a stranger whose teeth had decided to chatter. At 9:56, the engine hum shifted again. Not the full wedding reception smooth of normal. A lower octave, a test. The chandelier in the atrium above us flickered once, flirted with the idea of glowing properly, and settled for aggregate dim. The room applauded because human bodies cannot help it when electricity remembers itself. "I'm Theo," the panic attack kid said suddenly beside me, where I leaned on the aisle seat and pretended my legs weren't shaking. "Mara," I said. "I thought I was going to pass out," he said, staring at his hands like they were separate animals. "But it was like, when you said to raise my hand, it was like I could put the fear somewhere." "That's the trick," I said. "Put it somewhere it can be seen. Fear behaves better when it has a job." He nodded like I'd offered a hack, and he was on the side that collects them. "I'm going to become a person who carries a flashlight." At 10:03, the emergency lights shifted toward white. People made noises that betrayed how much their bodies had been holding. The PA pre-chime completed itself, triumphant as a toddler figuring out a zipper, and the captain's voice came through the speakers, 2 tones lower than in the afternoon and older by a decade. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said. "As you can tell, we have experienced a failure in our main electrical switchboard that caused a cascade to our emergency systems. Our engineering team has isolated the fault, and we are bringing power back in stages. There is no fire. There is no flooding. There is a long story I will spare you until morning. For now, please remain where you are until our crew escorts you back to your cabins. We thank you for your patience." Long story, the Galaxy Tattoo bartender murmured to me under her breath as she stacked the last of the paper cups. "That's a folder with a lot of emails in it. Write one for me," I said. "Tell them to buy the spare part before it breaks." She snorted. "Your crew in disguise." "Worse," I said. "Theater crew." At 10:11, the elevators decided to be doors again. One opened a foot and stopped. The flight attendant finished her dog story and slid 2 hands through the gap for 2 new hands to hold, while a maintenance man with a manual tool did the kind of careful crank that makes heroes out of wrists. Faces emerged from that box like divers coming up, eyes squeezed at first, then wide, then laughing the laugh you do when you fall and don't crack your skull. At 10:16, the banister felt warm under my palm, not heat, just blood coming back to things. Red lights turned to white. The ship caught itself. The room exhaled. Underneath it all, beneath carpet and leather and glass, a mechanical heartbeat reasserted itself. "There you are." "Okay," the staff captain said, clapping her hands once like a teacher ending recess. "We are going to move you by sections back to your cabins. The kitchens will be providing sandwiches and soup. There will be no elevators for a while. If you need help, put your hand up, yes, like that. Our crew will take you. Please, and I am going to use my captain voice now, do not regroup at the bar. You can toast the electricians tomorrow." The laugh that rolled through the room wasn't really about liquor. It was about being told what to do by someone who deserved to tell you. We filed out in color-coded waves. People pointed out the places they had sat to other people and said things like, "That was my spot," the way you would after camp. I found Marta and her partner wrapped around each other in the hallway outside the elevator bank, cheeks wet, smile messy. They told me a cat story, her partner said, wiping eyes like the story might have been suspect. "It wasn't good. It was excellent," I said, and meant the verb to tell, not the cat. In my cabin, the lamp by the bed warmed up the way my father's old radio used to. The air conditioning coughed and then purred. My phone connected and tried to offer me 10 articles about events I did not live through. I lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling very hard to make sure it would keep doing ceiling. At 1:00 a.m., a note slid under the door. Not paper, digital. The app offered an update from the captain in polite font. The switchboard had experienced an arc fault, it said. A thing needed to do with bus bars and breakers had made a different choice than the manual suggested. We had learned things. We would do better. The phrase, industry leading, appeared and did no one favors. The last line was the only one that felt like a person had written it. Thank you for breathing together. In the morning, the ship did what it always does. It turned drama into programming. There was a behind the scenes. Engineering talk scheduled at 11:00 a.m. In the theater that filled to standing room with people who wanted to know about generators and redundancy and the difference between shore power and no power. A man in a blue jumpsuit with grease under his nails and a name tag that said Elias explained that emergency batteries are meant to last 90 minutes, and how proud he was that ours had blinked red for 62, and that he hadn't given them names out loud because his mother raised him better than that. Someone asked why the lights didn't come on right away. He drew a diagram in the air that made me flirt with understanding. They didn't talk about the man in the bright shirt or the elevator story dog became. They didn't need to. The ship had scars it would call lessons. The rest was ours. At lunch, on the promenade, people nodded at strangers like neighbors. The Galaxy Tattoo bartender poured ginger ale for me without asking and slid it over like a handshake. You moved like crew last night, she said. I'm better with headsets, I said. Sometimes hearts are the same, she said, and went to their next moment. That afternoon in the library, I watched the man with the insurance policy help a teenage boy find a flashlight app on a new phone. In the atrium, the pianist played Moon River again, slower, as if the river had learned something about its banks. That night, I went out on deck and watched the ship's wake right itself from stern to horizon. The sea didn't care what we called it. The ship didn't stop pretending to be a building, even though it had briefly remembered it was a boat. The stars are always there. The lights just made them harder to see. When strangers ask later, were you scared? I say yes, because you should be for a bit when your building forgets it has a heart. But I am more haunted by the kind of dark that tells the truth. The minute the lights left, we became one organism again, hands on rails, voices with jobs, the slow ballet of 100 small right decisions. Every venue on the Elysian Crown had a catchy name, a marketing promise. No one had named that hour. The crew did later among themselves. Black Hour. It wasn't official. It didn't need to be. If you ever find yourself in it, do the one thing the lights can't do for you. Choose what to be. A hand, a voice, a person with a headlamp, a story someone can crawl through until the room remembers how to glow. We made it through the hour with no name, hands on rails, voices with jobs, paper cups passed like candles. The city remembered how to be a city, but not every threat is born of silence. Some arrive buzzing, small and certain, an eye that doesn't blink and a rule that thinks it can fly. No passwords this time, no breakers to coax awake. Just a silver insect skimming sunburnt water and balcony glass, choosing strangers for its memory. The blackout taught us to breathe together. The next lesson asks a different question. Who owns the air above a floating city? And what do we do when a toy decides it doesn't need permission? Curtains closed, eyes open. If you hear the bee that isn't a bee, look up, then look for the hands that shouldn't be praying. Story 8. The drone on deck 11. They told us on embarkation day that drones were forbidden, said it 3 times in 3 different accents so no one could claim a language problem later. No launch, no landing, no flying near or over the vessel. The cruise director chirped, all teeth and sunscreen. You may carry them in your luggage for use in port, but on board, big, sparkly nope. Everyone laughed. Rules sound like suggestions when the sea looks like glass. By day 2, the mariner's crown had remade us into its favorite kind of animal, sun-drugged, schedule-fed, pleasantly underslept. Deck 11 was the church and the marketplace of that life. Twin pools, an LED screen big enough to tell the moon to scoot over, a bar that dressed its slushies like birthday cakes, a DJ who believed in volume as a cure. Lifeguards paced their lanes with rescue tubes slung like bandoliers. Crew rolled towels into swans. I stood at the rail with a paper cup of ginger ale, watching engines push white handwriting into the water. That's where I first heard the sound, a mosquito with intentions. It came from the far end of Deck 11, beyond the movie screen, where cabanas and Cabernet collided. People looked up with the same expression a city makes when a siren isn't theirs. The first thing I saw wasn't the drone, it was hair lifting. A curtain of blonde by the hot tub went vertical. Then a beach hat skittered and spun like a coin deciding. Then, over the pool, low and shore, a silver quadcopter rose into view, glossy as a fish and twice as smug. It was small, the size of a dinner plate maybe, but it carried itself like a secret. It paused over the deep end, camera gimbaled, lens black as an eye. Everyone reacted the way you do when a bee lands on a picnic, half awe, half inventory of exits. Not aloud. The lifeguard with the shaved head said in a voice that had already decided what to do next. He blew his whistle, 3 hard blasts, the shipboard stopped that. On his radio, I heard, unauthorized UAV on 11, security to pool deck. UAV, the letters made the toy grow teeth. The drone drifted sideways with the arrogant precision of something that knows more math than you do. It skimmed along the line of cabins 1 deck below, just out of reach. A woman in a robe stepped onto her balcony to see what the noise was and jerked back when the lens blinked at her. Somewhere, someone shouted a name that ended in, why, the way you yell at a toddler near a candle. Find the pilot, the staff captain said into a 2-way. She was the same one I'd seen during the black hour on a different ship, the posture of a person whose eyebrows had saved lives. Kill the toys and find the human. Security fanned out in the least theatrical way possible. They weren't searching for a controller. They were searching for hands, that particular prayerful clutch. Deck 11 is a lot of nowhere you can be someone. People leaned behind plants. Men took photos with their phones in a way that added no value. I looked for movement that didn't match the tempo of the crowd. The drone reared up like a horse and then shot forward. A startling, insecty acceleration that made 3 people gasp and 1 man duck with the commitment of someone who used to play baseball. It flew under the sky ribbon bridge that arced between hot tubs, a cousin of a glass disaster I did not need to remember, and then down toward the starboard lifeboat deck. For a heartbeat, it disappeared in shadows. When it came out, it was heavier, slower by a hair, like things are when they're carrying something. Net it, the staff captain said. We don't have a net team on 11, someone answered, apologetic. Only on 5. Then you are the net, she said, heading toward the stairwell like obligation had a leash on her. The drone floated above the aft pool again, as if considering a landing. 2 crew members stepped forward with towels spread like big white butterfly nets. The drone twitched sideways, teasing. The towels snapped shut on nothing. Laughter erupted because people can't help it when potential farce collides with authority. Then the drone rose fast, straight up, shoulder high, roof high, almost screen high, until the wind decided to be a person again and pushed. It wobbled, recovered, moved into clean air, and aimed for the open sky over the stern. For a second, I thought we'd all been witnesses to a minor crime that remembered how to get away. 2 decks below, near the lifeboat stations, a maintenance worker in coveralls looked up, frowned, and reached up to adjust a camera dome. There was a small, round sticker stuck to the lens, a perfect black eye. The drone had blinked a camera. It wasn't just a toy then, it was a hand. By sunset, rumors had become their own cruise activity. The drone belonged to a YouTuber with 1 million followers. The drone belonged to the ship. The drone belonged to a jealous husband. The drone belonged to a cartel. The drone belonged to experienced tech. The last one made the bartender with the galaxy tattoo snort soda up her nose. "Look," she said, wiping her mouth and leaning on the bar like we were in on something. I pour drinks, not conspiracies. But if a vendor was flying a drone over my guests' swimsuits, I would set that vendor on fire with my eyes. We watched the sun roll downhill. I asked for another ginger ale and a story. She gave me both. 3 sailings ago, she said, voice low enough not to be part of the show, someone flew one off the helipad at sunrise to capture content. We confiscated it, and the captain gave a speech about airspace and safety. 2 days later, a drone-shaped shadow buzzed the aft balconies. People's breakfasts went airborne. Security spent 6 hours watching camera feeds. You know what they found? She tucked a curl behind her ear. A guy flying from his balcony with a blanket over his head like a kid with a flashlight under a sheet, because he didn't want the camera to see him. Did it work? I asked. For 6 hours, she said. Then his wife turned him in. We laughed, then didn't, because the camera dome down by the lifeboat station was still wearing its sticker. Maintenance had peeled it off with a heat gun, and by dusk another had appeared. Somewhere above us, a drone was playing tag with our eyes. I found the pilot on accident, which is how you find things that don't want to be found. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I'm an audio tech by trade. I like wires that obey and signals that do what they are told. After some of the Arcadia wave nonsense with wristbands that open doors without asking, I'd begun carrying a little handheld spectrum analyzer, part toy, part compass. On land, I use it to hunt bad Wi-Fi at theaters and Christmas lights that won't shut up. At sea, it's a way to pretend the chaos has an index. On deck 12, forward of the pools, just past the mini-golf where fake whales breach from fake waves, the analyzer lit like a xylophone. 2, 4 gigahertz, 5, 8 gigahertz, both singing. The pattern was familiar. Short bursts, clean channels, the breath of a controller talking to a copter that wants to kiss the wind. I followed the peaks to the quiet sun deck, the one with the polite sign asking adults to remember what adult means. A man in a gray hoodie sat in a deck chair with a book open on his chest. The book was upside down. His hands were in his lap, still and cupped in the shape of prayer, which is also the shape of a controller. The thing between his palms could have been a portable game console. It could have been a phone. It could have been the steering wheel of a ghost. I know a video game when I see one, I said, because subtlety is overrated when rubber meets deck. He looked up slowly, with the tranquil unsurprise of a cat mid-stretch. Do you? Security's looking for hands like yours, I said. You might want to hold something else. He smiled, affable tan. Expensive. I'm reading, he said, and lifted the upside-down book. In public, as my therapist recommends. The analyzer on my watch pulsed. Behind him, beyond the rail, a silver thing rose from the shadow of the funnel, grabbed air, and dipped toward the pool deck again. His thumbs moved the smallest amount a human can move them and still move the world. I turned to go find a person with a badge and returned with a person with a whistle, the lifeguard with the shaved head, whose name tag said Roch in block letters like a rock. He took in the scene the way a dog takes in a scent, all forward attention and no wasted motion. Sir, Roch said, you can give me the controller and explain yourself, or you can keep the controller and explain yourself in a room. Hoodie Guy's smile didn't dim. I don't know what you're talking, Ab. You're flying a drone over open water near people, which is stupid, and over ship structure, which is not allowed, Roch said. I'm boring myself quoting the handbook. Your choice. Behind us, the staff captain's radio voice. 11, look up. The drone had come to the edge of a stunt. It hovered above the big LED screen like a moth considering a porch light. The DJ put on a track that had bass enough to thicken air. The crowd, lotioned, loose, began to cheer at the idea of ridiculousness without knowing which flavor it would be. The drone dipped, then rose, then darted like that. Hoodie Guy's right thumb moved. The drone accelerated toward the screen, then stopped dead. A neat little flex, nothing to see. Just look what I can do, Roch sighed. Controller, he said. Now. Hoodie Guy hesitated a fraction. It was all the permission Roch needed. He reached down, quick as a rescue launch, and plucked the thing from the man's hands. The drone jittered, confused, then hovered. Roch didn't try to fly it, he did something smarter. He lifted the crane of his arm toward the sky like a conductor, then lowered it. The drone descended obediently, as if hands could still talk without electronics. And then it bolted. Hoodie Guy grinned, not bothering to hide it now. Fail-safe, he said. Return to home. Where's home? I asked him. He smiled wider. Not here. The drone rose into the wind above deck, pivoted toward the stern, and ran for its life like a gray fish. Security on 11 moved to net it again with towels. It laughed, if drones can do that, and streaked toward the starboard side. I followed the sound until it went thin and the sky swallowed it. When I looked back, Hoodie Guy was a shape vanishing around a corner into a crowd, shedding his book like a snake's skin. 2 hours later, the first balcony photo hit the rumor mill. A woman claimed a drone had hovered outside her room and captured her in a state of mid-bathrobe. She showed a grainy image, a zoomed-in frame from something else, a shape in a window that might have been her and might have been a trick. Security took her statement. Guest services refunded a spa treatment she hadn't booked. The staff captain started using the phrase airspace violation like a person wiping a table that refuses to be clean. At midnight, on our nightly deck walk, when the ship pretends it is smaller than it is and the ocean pretends it isn't a fact, I saw 2 maintenance guys at the lifeboat deck, standing under the newly cleaned camera dome. One had a headlamp, the other held up a small, black round with a magnet embedded, sticky with adhesive. They peeled it like gum from a shoe. On the hatch next to them, someone had scratched 2 neat arcs in permanent marker, the shape of a flight path. Chalk marks for a sky thief. Why the stickers? I asked, because my mouth does that. The headlamp guy grinned without joy. Blind the eyes, he said. Make a little darkness when you need it, like the black hour, only selfish. The next morning, my phone chimed with a notification from the ship's app. Security notice. Please keep curtains drawn in cabins when changing clothing. Do not engage with unauthorized drones. Report sightings to 44. The advice was so obvious it felt like a dare. I went to the coffee bar for a cinnamon roll and a second pair of eyes. The Galaxy tattoo bartender was working breakfast, apron over a t-shirt that said espresso yourself. She slid me a coffee and bent close. They found a drop point, she said. Under the ping pong table on 11, magnet hidden in the corner. Little shelf big enough for GoPro and a battery the size of a bite. A shelf for what? I asked. Memory, she said. Or something that steals it. She tapped my wrist where my dolphin key-shaped tan line still wasn't sure it trusted the sun. I hate that these things are good words for bad things. I thought about the experienced tech guy we'd met on the Arcadia wave and how tools meant to make us frictionless had sandpaper edges when the wrong hands held them. Do you think they are skimming? I asked. Her jaw tightened in a way that made me wish law had caught up with ships. I think the staff captain had a meeting last night with a vendor who will not bill hours for a while. And I think there are two kinds of people in this world: the ones who build things and the ones who borrow without asking. A man in a floral shirt stepped up to the counter and asked for 3 mochachinos with extra whip for the ladies. The bartender smiled so nicely, he didn't notice he'd been processed. The afternoon was windy enough to steal conversation. Deck 11 emptied of paperbacks and filled with bravado. People dared the hot tub like it was a dare back. At 4, during a line dance with the DJ yelling left when left was a suggestion, I saw a flash above the aft funnel, silver flicker, there and gone. The spectrum analyzer purred. I turned and scanned the line of loungers. No hoodie guy, no book guy. Then I saw her. A woman with a braid like a rope, wearing a visor and sunglasses so big they could have lived their own lives. She held a tablet vertically, thumbs stroking the edges. She could have been playing a game, or ordering a sandwich, or drawing a circle in the air around us. She lifted her head the slightest amount, and the drone slipped into view above the movie screen again, as if called to heel. 2 security guards in white polos moved along the rail with towels. A third carried something I hadn't seen on a ship before, a small cannon with a net curled like a sleeping snake. The net gun looked like a toy for boys, which is another way to say it looked like a plan. The drone skittered sideways, straight down the aisle between 2 rows of deck chairs. People ducked. One woman swatted at it with a copy of a paperback whose title promised a love that has never existed in the history of the world. The drone rose and the net shot, hiss, thump, tangle, cheering, not polite, not performative, the real kind that comes from stomach and marrow, and somewhere you inherited from ancestors who were thrilled when anything that scared them was briefly in a bag. The drone bucked in its net like a bad idea. The guard pinned it under his forearm the way you pin a dog that forgot manners. The crowd surged. Roch blew his whistle like he was telling a hurricane to behave, and the hurricane had manners. The staff captain arrived with a calm like a blueprint. She cut 2 zip ties, pulled a battery the size of a wallet out of the belly of the thing, and it died in her hands like a bird. Braid Visor stood. She did not run, neither did she look like someone who thought about running. Security moved in a way that respected the incident report they would have to write later. Not too fast, not too slow, hands visible, dignity offered. "Ma'am," one said, and the entire ship leaned to hear the tone of that word. It was firm. It had apology in it for reasons that had nothing to do with her. They walked her away without cuffs, because cuffs are theater we weren't selling today. The crowd watched the drone on the deck take shallow, breathless gulps of air it couldn't use anymore. Someone clapped. Someone else booed. A child asked her mother if that meant we had to go inside, and the mother said no, baby, adults will be adults. You'd think that would be the end, but endings on ships are like magic tricks. You don't trust them until you see where the hand goes. That night, after the fireworks of theater show and the quiet of the halls that only happens when the sea is big enough to hum you asleep, a drone buzzed our balcony door. It was closer than should have been possible without touching glass. The sound was a ricochet in the bones. The red light on the camera blinked like a heartbeat with a stutter. I stood very still in the dark. You learn more from creatures by not being a creature. The drone hovered, slid laterally, peered into our room through a 3-inch gap where the curtains didn't overlap, then moved on. It didn't bump the door. It didn't steal courage. It didn't do anything except know. I waited 5 seconds to count to coin flip numbers and stepped out onto the balcony. The drone was following a line, not random, not curious. It moved balcony to balcony, pause, pier, slide. It was reading. Down by the promenade, a deck light flickered and died. The drone reached up toward the darkness it had made. In the reflection of the glass, I saw another drone, a twin or a ghost, hovering just beyond the edge of the ship, out over the water where jurisdiction wears waves. Farther out, on the fringe of the ship's light, a small boat bobbed with no right to be there, its silhouette wrong for a fishing skiff, wrong for anything except a plan. I took a photo with my phone on no flash and sent it to the only person on board who would do more than send a fruit basket, the staff captain. I didn't have her number, but the app had a report safety button, and somewhere in the world a server decided my upload mattered. 30 seconds later, a voice outside, a crew voice, pins in it, said, "Ma'am, back inside, please." Then lower, on a radio, vision on starboard drone, additional asset in water. What happened next? I learned later, had layers I can only lay out like cards. Security scrambled a deck team with net guns to the promenade and a port team to the lifeboat deck. Engineering cut power to the starboard string of balcony outlets because drones like currents. The bridge swung the ship a hair to port to put wind between us and the open sea. And somewhere down on deck 3, a tender crew with a launch license and opinions about night maneuvers suited up to go tell a boat to choose a different story. On my balcony, in my sandals, in my heart that had learned a new chord during the black hour, I watched a net arc through light and catch a drone that did not like being in a sentence with the word caught. It spun like anger, then was quiet. Beyond, the second drone lifted, thought about leaving, and left straight up into dark toward whoever owns the sky at midnight. Out past that, the small boat's engine coughed, then complied with the concept of elsewhere. The staff captain's voice came over the PA 5 minutes later, calm, factual, older. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently addressing an airspace intrusion on our starboard side. Please remain inside your cabins and keep your balcony doors closed. We apologize for any inconvenience." Inconvenience was a light word for the thing that had buzzed our curtains. But I understood. You talk like that when you're keeping panic in a room and facts in a file. By morning, the official story was sanitized enough to eat with a spoon. A guest-operated drone had been intercepted. Another had been observed off the vessel's starboard beam and moved on when contacted. Guests were reminded of policy and privacy and safety zones. The phrase "local authorities" did a lot of work in 2 sentences, and so did compliance. What we told over breakfast was different. The tinny bee, the towel nets, the boat in the ink. The way the Galaxy tattoo bartender had poured water into paper cups during the black hour and now poured coffee into the same cups with the same hands and the same compressed joke at the corners of her mouth. We are a city until we are a boat. At the engineering Q&A, a man asked if the ship had anti-drone guns. The officer on stage, an electrician with a name tag that said Aaliyah because all ships share a short list of heroes, smiled in a way that managed to be both friendly and not an answer. "We have procedures," he said, "and nets." Someone wanted to know why the cameras hadn't caught everything from the first second. Aaliyah's eyes slid up to the theater lights as if they could hide him. "Because people who want to break rules also know how to read forums," he said. "And because unfortunately magnets are faster than meetings." We disembarked 2 days later in a port where the cranes looked like storks and the customs building had been a casino in a previous life. At the foot of the gangway, a pair of officers in blue talked to a woman in a visor who had learned to keep her face still. The staff captain shook hands without story. The net gun lay in a crate with the other props you don't put in brochures. I've since learned more than I wanted to about drones. Geofencing, return to home, signal hopping, how a $1.50 magnet can make a camera forget what it is, and a $500 toy can become a skeleton key for 1,000 little doors we didn't know we had. I've learned the words airspace and jurisdiction are cousins who fight at dinner. I've learned no one owns the wind and everyone is a guest. If you're listening to this on a balcony at sunset, with a ship's wake riding the story behind you and a drink sweating in your hand, and you hear a thin, industrious whine from the shadow of the funnel, don't panic. Close your curtains. Call the number. Watch the people with nets move like punctuation. Be the kind of neighbor who notices the upside-down book. And if you packed a drone because the world is prettier from above, remember there are times and places to be a bird. The deck with children in swimsuits is not one. The line of other people's windows is not one. The night at sea, with one small boat and two small machines, and a whole city trying to sleep above water that doesn't care, is not one. Deck 11 will go back to music. Towels will go back to being swans. The LED screen will go back to showing movies where the threat is large and obvious and solved by credits. But every time I hear a "be now," I picture a tiny lens choosing someone else's moment, and I think of nets and hands and the word we mean when we say no to a thing we could do. Not fear, not prudery, just the kind of respect that keeps a city and a boat a boat. We owned the air for a minute. Towels became nets, patience became a law, and a silver insect learned the word no. But not every trespass arrives buzzing. Some don't look back at you with a red eye. They glint from a stainless mouth and say, "Help yourself." We've argued about who owns the sky above a floating city. Now let's talk about who owns the water inside it, what we trust to touch our lips, our kids' tongues, our ordinary, thirsty moments. No passwords to crack, no pilot to unmask, just a blue-lit glacier in a wall and a shortcut taken somewhere behind it. Little problems wear neon halos, big ones pretend to taste like nothing. Curtains closed saved the cabins. Tonight, it's cups down, eyes open. If your mouth says pennies, believe it. Story 9, the blue ice machine. On deck 9, just past the buffet where the cinnamon rolls turned grown men into children, there was an ice machine that glowed like a small lagoon. Someone in branding had decided to bathe it in LED blue, so the cubed ice looked neon and clean, like it had been rinsed in sky. People lined up for that glow the way moths make poor decisions, filling paper cups, crowning sodas, chewing the pellets the way cruise people chew pellets. It had a label etched into the stainless near the lip, Ice 9B. I'm not superstitious, but the 9 made me smile. I was traveling with my daughter, Ruby, 15, injuredly honest, hair dyed a red so precise it had to be named after a fruit. The trip had been my idea, a penance after 3 years of me choosing the hospital over weekends. I manage a water safety program for a health system, Legionella plans, cooling towers, the invisible things that make water behave. The work is quiet until it isn't. I had promised Ruby no lectures, and, as I would soon prove, I am terrible at promises. On embarkation day, she found ICE 9B in the first hour and adopted it like a stray. "It makes perfect chew ice," she said, crunching through a mountain in a clear cup. "The other ones taste like freezer." She offered me a chip. It clicked against my molars the way ice does when it's just small enough to be worth the risk. Clean, maybe too clean. "Like pool?" I asked. She frowned. "Like pennies," she said, then shrugged and went to get lemonade. By the second morning, the machine had become a stop on our loop. The same pattern you develop at sea as if you're synchronizing with tides. Breakfast, Deck 4 library, trivia we always lost to a team named Seize the DAY. The pool if the wind cooperated. A walk on the lifeboat deck because pretending the ocean is not a fact is exhausting. Then ICE 9B because habits are comfort. The first sign something was wrong was so small I would have missed it if Ruby hadn't made a noise I knew too well. Half laugh, half wince. She touched her lip and pulled her finger away, surprised. There was a tiny white blister on the inside curve, the kind you get when you drink soup too soon. "You burned yourself?" I asked, over-parent already engaged. "On ice," she said, making a face at me that contained both love and please do not be you for 5 minutes. I looked around. 2 kids were scooping ice into a pitcher like they were fueling a rocket. An older woman filled a water bottle and hissed when a cube popped out and hit her knuckle. "Sharp," she said to no one, then laughed at herself and wheeled away the way people do when they decide not to make a thing a thing. At lunch, the buffet was normal, chip trays replenishing, staff smiling into their scripts. The Galaxy tattoo bartender from a deck up was on soda duty, arms in constant motion. "Ginger ale," she said, already pouring. "You work everywhere," I said. "That's the job," she grinned. "If you ever see me at the bow with a rope, run the other way." We were 3 sips into "How was your day" when a kid 2 tables over took a swallow of water and gagged. The sound cut the room. His father patted his back, the mother went for napkins. "What's wrong?" she asked, and the boy's voice came out ragged and honest. "It burns." They left with the kind of speed parents use when their bodies remember smaller bodies. On the way, they passed the blue machine. Several people were lined up, cups held in anticipation the way communion preps you for miracles. At 3 p.m., Deck 9 became an obstacle course of housekeeping carts. The carts carried spray bottles with laminated instructions in 6 languages. Quat sanitizer. The liquid in the clear tubes was a friendly blue. Crew in gloves wiped handrails like they'd done something unforgivable. A placard slid into place over ICE 9B, out of order. By dinner, the sign had flipped to open again like a magic trick. The line returned, relieved. You want machines to heal quickly, it means the world is kind. At 10, Ruby brushed her teeth and yelped. She stuck her tongue out at the mirror. There were 2 small white spots on either side like punctuation. "Stop," I said, because hope is a reflex. "We'll go see the nurse in the morning if it's still bugging you." "You're going to take apart the ice machine," she said, deadpan, then climbed into her bunk and went to sleep, the way teenagers do, in one movement that forgives you for everything. She was almost right. I didn't sleep. Once a thing scratches at my brain, it doesn't stop. At 2, I gave up pretending, left a note on the desk for Ruby that said gone to stare at water, and went for a walk with my insomnia. Deck 9 at night is a different country. The buffet is asleep, the pastry towers put away like the rich hide their art during wars. The blue machine glowed to no one. Up close, the light edged the silver in a way that made the steel look colder than it was. I bent to the grill, put my hand near, not touching, and listened. Compressors hum, a sound you recognize if you've ever had to slap one into working. This one had a tremor under it, a shiver you get when a unit is cycling through a cleaning mode. Ice machines sanitize themselves. They have to. There's an automatic system in the cabinet that votes for clean on a timer, feeding a small amount of disinfectant into the water that floods the ice tray, then rinsing it out before the next harvest. It's clever, and if the valve that closes after dosing fails, you can end up with cleaner where your ice wants to be. Not good. Not rare. A pantry door a few feet away had been left on the latch. I know better. I pushed and stepped into a world that wasn't mine. The smell hit me first. Lemon and hospital and a sweet edge that means an accident is pretending it isn't. A tube led from a small opaque jug in a caddy up to a dosing pump the size of a paperback. Another tube ran from the pump through the wall toward the bright machine outside. On the jug, a label in friendly font. Sanitizer concentrate for automatic injection. Below it, in the kind of writing you only read after there's a problem, a pictogram of a hand with a drop landing on it and a small explosion of redness. I crouched and peered at the pump. There should have been a check valve between the dosing line and the water line. There was something. It was installed backward. Or maybe it was simply stuck. I took out my phone and snapped a picture because that is what you do when your memory deserves a second witness. "Sir," a voice behind me said, and even before I stood, I knew the posture that went with it. Polite, tired, not interested in theater. "This is not a guest area." I turned. A pantry attendant stood in the doorway, hands half raised, a manager behind him with a mouth that wanted the conversation to be simpler. "I'm sorry," I said, and held up my hands the way you do in kitchens when you don't want to be read as threat. "I work in water systems. I think your sanitizer injection might be stuck open." "Engineering is on it," the manager said reflexively. "Okay," I said gently. "But until they arrive, maybe leave the machine off." "It's off," he said, and then we both looked at the blue glow under the door and the thin sheet of new ice sliding into the bin like a waterfall, and he added the word now to the phrase in his head and pressed a button with more force than buttons deserve. He escorted me out because that was his job, and I let him because that was mine. Outside, under the LEDC, I watched the machine give up and wind down. A shiver of compressors quitting went through the steel. The line dissolved. On the way back to the cabin, a folded piece of paper slid under my foot like a fish. I picked it up, expecting a flyer for a spa special, and found aggressive cursive instead. "You don't know what you're talking about. Stop." I folded it and put it in my pocket like you put a stone in a pocket to remember you have muscles. In the morning, Ruby's blisters had turned into ulcers the size of a lentil. They looked angrier. The nurse at the medical center took one glance and said, "Irritant, we're seeing a few of these." She handed Ruby a little bottle of something mint and numbing. "No citrus, no salt. Soup if you can handle it." "From Blue 9, Ruby said, making the word sound like a character from a bad cartoon. The nurse lifted one shoulder in a kind of apology professionals make when they've been warned not to say the thing in their throat. "The chefs have posted a temporary notice about ice," she said. "We're bringing pre-bagged from the galley. The self-serve machines are being evaluated." Evaluated. The word ships use when the real verb is taken apart. Back on Deck 9, ICE-9B wore a printed shroud, maintenance. The slot where ice fell was taped up. Staff had pulled 2 rolling bins of bagged ice from somewhere cold and were using scoops to fill people's cups. I watched a man in a suit watch the staff scoop the way cats watch lasers. He seemed offended by the idea of additional steps. I asked to speak with someone in charge. It took 3 layered apologies and a long look at my business card before I got ushered into a room with the staff captain. She closed the door, offered me water bottled, and let the smile leave her face. "Tell me what you saw," she said. I told her valves and pumps and my worry that the automatic dosing cycle had failed closed, pushing sanitizer into the makeup water. I told her about Ruby's mouth, the boy at lunch, the night's blue glow, and the way the out-of-order sign had done theater. I told her about the note, because I am not brave enough to keep secrets for strangers. She listened like I'd brought her a blueprint. "Our engineers say the device has been serviced," she said. "We use a third-party vendor. They're on board this sailing." "I'd like to meet them," I said before my better judgment could gather and shush me. "At least to know what chemical is in the jug and how the dosing is set." She tilted her head. "You aren't crew," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a true sentence spoken out loud. "No," I said. "Just someone whose kid got hurt." She called someone on a radio in a way that managed not to be a call, and 10 minutes later a man with a lanyard that said Aquapoint arrived, hair in a gelled wave, shirt that had never seen a wet rag. He smiled at me the way vendors smile when they spot a person who reads manuals. "Our systems have been installed fleet-wide," he said, unnecessarily. "We pride ourselves on safety." "What's in the jug?" I asked. "Non-foaming sanitizer," he said, lightly defensive. "EPA registered." "Quaternary ammonium?" I asked. He blinked twice, the speed of someone searching a word. "Quat," he said, landing on the nickname the way a child lands on the sofa. "Yes, quat is fine when it's at the right number. Too much and you get burns that look like bites." "You don't need to know chemistry to know pain" is a sentence you shouldn't have to parse in a dining room. "We've installed backflow and a blocker that physically disconnects the line when the unit is on production," he continued. "It's impossible for it to dose during ice harvest. Unless the valve sticks," I said, "or is installed wrong, or the pump thinks it's in clean mode because the control got confused." He smiled again, tight. "Our controls don't get confused." "Everything gets confused," I said. "Machines are just ambitious toddlers." The staff captain's mouth twitched, the ghost of humor passing through duty. We went to the pantry. The jug sat in its caddy, the pump in its wall cradle, the lines neat in their clamps. The install looked correct now, which was either reassuring or deeply not. The vendor tech tapped a screen with one finger like you tap a sleeping animal. "See," he said. "Off, no dosing, the event logs show nothing." "I'd love a copy of those," I said, too quick. "Proprietary," he replied, even quicker. The staff captain cleared her throat in a way that suggested she knew both of us were being ourselves. "We'll be taking the unit offline," she said. "All self-serve ice machines. We'll provide ice from sealed bags until we can assure everyone that the system is safe. The buffet will descend into anarchy," the vendor said. "Maybe a joke, probably not. It will survive soup," she said, "and so will the guests." On the way out, the pantry attendant, the one with his button finger poised over the machine the night before, caught my eye and gave me a look I recognized from residents who have seen a thing go wrong in a way a policy doesn't cover. Gratitude and grief mixed together make a face you don't forget. For the next day, the ship became a city without self-serve ice. Staff scooped. People made jokes about the blue machine like it was a monster in the hold. Ruby sucked soup carefully and watched a movie that had too many car chases for soup. The Galaxy tattoo bartender poured me ginger ale and added a napkin with "sorry about your kid" written in pen in tiny letters under her hand so no one else could see. Then the part of the story that always comes arrive the way paper arrives under doors. Someone slid me an envelope. Inside, a photograph printed on the ship's glossy paper, a close-up of ICE-9B's dosing pump. The check valve in the image was installed the right way now, but along the edge of the picture, a smear of blue traced the line below the junction. Someone had taken the photo while the mistake was still alive. There was no note. On the back, in faint ballpoint, 9B, service 2 weeks ago. Under that, temporary bypass for testing, in quotes. I took it to the staff captain. She looked at it and closed her eyes the way you close your eyes when your jaw would betray something your face cannot afford to say. "Thank you," she said. "Engineering will evaluate." "Who wrote the quotes?" I asked. She exhaled. "Probably the same people who will explain them at 9 a.m. I sat in the back of a room at 9 populated by men who use "we" when they mean you. The vendor used slides that said words like integrity and controls. The chief engineer used others like isolated and corrected. None of them said the phrase temporary bypass for testing out loud. The staff captain did not look at anyone specific when she said, "A child is not a test." After the meeting, a crew member caught me by the elevators. He was young, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a neat tattoo of a swallow just visible at his wrist. The same woman from laundry I'd seen clapping when Nai returned to the ship 2 ports ago. He handed me a scrap of paper torn from a shipping label. 3 words, a time, a place. Blue room, 1400 pantry. I went. Of course I did. The pantry was crowded with stainless and the sound of air conditioners that means serious. 2 staff stood close together like conspirators, but were only trying to occupy the same safe square foot. The pantry attendant from night 1 set a small white bucket on the counter. It contained cubes that looked like any other cubes until you put your face near and the edge of clean cut your nose. "I saved some from last night," he said. I thought maybe they'd want a test. They told me to dump. Who told you? I asked. He shrugged at the floor. People in shirts, he said. I pulled a pool test kit from my bag. Yes, I know, I said I was on vacation. Don't judge me. I dipped the strip into the melt in the bucket, rattled off the seconds because I can't not, then held it next to the color chart. High, not chlorine pool high, something else. I made a second strip dance through a control cup of bottled water. Normal. I took photos of the colors next to the strips with the day's paper in the frame like I was a bad detective on an amateur show. Evidence even when you aren't allowed to call it that. At 3, the captain's voice came through the ship like a slow door opening. He kept it to facts because he was good at his job. A component in an ice system had failed. It had been corrected. A small number of guests had experienced irritation. Medical assistance had been provided. Out of caution, all self-serve machines would be offline until the end of the sailing. The company valued safety. The company was grateful for patience. The phrase external vendor had the weight of a suitcase he would like someone else to carry. That night, Ruby fell asleep while watching a baking show where someone cried over a collapsed moose. I went out on deck and stood by the rail, the ocean leaning along, an old dog at heel. The Galaxy tattoo bartender came out on a break and stood beside me, arms folded, a breath that looked like a thaw. We caught it, she said, before it was a bigger story. It was big enough, I said, thinking of a white spot the size of a lentil that felt like a paragraph. She nodded. You ever notice, she said, how the worst stuff on ships pretends to be small first? Little sounds, little smells, little notes. That's how water kills, I said, and then winced at my mouth being my mouth. She smiled sideways. And sometimes how we keep it from doing that, she said. A little hand, a little photo, a little no. On the last morning, a letter slid under our door containing the usual cruise line poetry. Enhanced protocols, partner review, onboard credit. There was a separate note in plain pen on hotel stationery, folded into the envelope like a smuggled truth. Tell Ruby I'm sorry. Pantry. We brought the note home with the towel animal eyes and a fridge magnet that says SEA ya, and pinned it under our calendar like you pin important things, including small apologies. Here is what I tell people now when they ask about the blue ice machine. It was a machine that did what machines do. What we tell them, what they think we told them, and sometimes the worst version of a misunderstanding. A valve stuck. A habit held. A human hurried. Then other humans chose something else, turned off a switch, made a call, kept a bucket, wrote a sentence on paper when email would have forgotten. If you're watching this in a dining room glittering with stainless, with a cup outstretched toward a blue-lit glacier in a wall, trust your mouth more than the bulb. If it tastes like pennies, if it smells like a too-clean classroom, if your lip thinks soup in July, stop. Ask for a scoop from a bag. Ask for a supervisor and use the word irritation because it gets attention without making enemies. If someone tells you everything is fine and your tongue says otherwise, listen to the organ that lives in your face. It is a better diplomat than your need to be liked. A ship is a city that floats because thousands of small things agree to be honest at once. When even one of those things lies or is confused, another small thing has to tell the truth. On deck 9, under that blue silly light, ICE 9B forgot itself for a day. Enough people remembered. That's the story. That, and a teenage girl who will forever be suspicious of machines with neon halos, and a father who can't stop hearing the hum of a pump, and a page under a door that said stop and made him do the opposite. Last night we learned a simple law, trust your mouth. When the water tasted like pennies, the city listened and a neon glacier went dark. But safety isn't only about what you sip under stainless lights. It's also about the roads you borrow, who claims them, and what they ask in return. No chemistry today. No valves to blame. Just uniforms that don't match, fees that don't have receipts, and a blue hole in the limestone promising sky at the bottom. On board, a switch saved tongues. Off-ship, the exits are stranger. A rope that is a door, a tunnel meant for storms, a bus that decides to be a lifeboat. Keep your curiosity. Pack a plan. If the cones are wrong and the badges are borrowed, believe the road. The cenote will wait. Story 10, Roadblock at the cenote. We picked the cenote because the brochure said sky water. The photos looked like something a painter would make up. Light spearing down through a round hole in the jungle roof, a blue so deep it seemed to hum. The ship's excursion was sold out by the time I clicked, so I did the thing everyone swears they won't do and then does. I booked independently. Same itinerary, the website promised, half the price, twice the soul. The reviews were full of words like authentic and local lunch and hidden cavern the big buses don't know about. It sounded like a deal with the good kind of risk. My daughter, Ruby, 15, blunt, hair the exact red of a stop sign, rolled her eyes at the matching wristbands they gave us at the pier. Tourist camouflage, she said, tugging hers down her arm. We look like walking coupons. Our driver's name was Mateo. He had the warm, practiced English of someone who had picked it up between roads. Our guide, Anna, was a geology student on semester break, a headlamp looped around her wrist like a bracelet. The van smelled like sunscreen and a cooler full of ham sandwiches. There were 8 of us, a retired Canadian couple with matching sun hats, a honeymoon pair who kept saying content like it was a meal, a solo guy with a camera that cost more than our cruise, me, Ruby, 2 cenotes, Anna said as we crept out of the port into town, her voice doing tour guide cheer without tipping into cheerleader. 1 open, like a blue eye. 1 cavern for the brave. We go early to beat the big buses. We stop in a village for cochinita pibil if you eat pork. If not, we feed you other grandmother food. Okay. We caroused because we had paid for okay. The first 20 minutes were a postcard. Palms and bougainvillea, roadside stands with pyramids of limes, motto taxis painted like ladybugs skittering between trucks. Then the town thinned and the jungle came up close. The highway was 1 clean line of asphalt laid over limestone older than memory. Anna pointed out sinkhole scars, places where the rock had caved years ago and the road had been stitched back together. This land is thirsty, she said. Everything falls into it eventually. We passed a checkpoint with real soldiers, National Guard in desert uniforms, an armored truck, an air of bored competence. They waved us through. The honeymooners took a picture and posted it before the truck was small in the mirror. The Canadian woman whispered to her husband, "I feel safer already," and he patted the bag with their passports like it was a dog. 10 minutes later, the road narrowed and the asphalt went from new to patched to the kind of tired you can feel in the wheel wells. Anna frowned at Mateo's dash like it could answer questions. "Waze says left up here," she said. "The open cenote first. There's a festival in the town," Mateo said without looking at us. "We take a back way. Nicer." The road he chose was technically a road. The jungle leaned in so close the van's windows greened. I felt my shoulders creep up the way they do when a space forgets it's public. Ruby put her phone away without comment, a sign she had decided to concentrate on surviving me, which she considers her life's hardest work. We saw the cones from far off, orange against the green the way a tiger is not a surprise. 2 in a row, then a gaps not spaced quite right set of 3. A pickup truck sat sideways across the lane, tailgate down. A plank with nails lay off to one side, like it was waiting its turn to be useful. 2 men stood in reflective vests with Policia Municipal stenciled in cracked letters on the back. Their hats didn't match. One wore a black ball cap with a baseball team logo, the other had a sun hat the color of impatience. They were clean-shaven and dirty at the same time. The man with the baseball cap held a clipboard as if it could save lives. Mateo slowed. Anna went very still, the kind of stillness that says a person has been taught to be furniture when necessary. Permisos, baseball cap said when we stopped. His voice had too much authority and not enough training. For what? Anna asked, all innocence and syllables. For the cenote, he said, waving at the thick jungle like it was a building. Special day, we collect. He held out the clipboard like a communion plate. There was a sheet with columns and a number next to the word donativo that was not a donation. The Canadian husband reached for his wallet before his wife's hand found his wrist. It's fine, Mateo murmured, low, without turning. We pay and go. The man in the sun hat leaned down to the passenger window and looked into our van the way people look into fish tanks. His eyes slid over each of us, counting, maybe, choosing maybe. Phones, he said and pointed at the camera guy's camera. No photos. Anna smiled the kind of smile you reserve for neighbors who play loud music. Of course, she said. We are respectful. We are guests. Mateo pulled bills from a zipper pouch in the glove box, careful to let the bigger ones stay hidden. Baseball cap made a show of writing down something. Sun Hat lost interest and went to talk to a man who had stepped out from the trees in a shirt that used to be a uniform and a patch that had never met its factory. He had a radio with a chipped antenna. He spoke into it, listened, and nodded without changing his face. We rolled forward, tires picking up a strip of old tar that slapped underneath like a loud thought. Around the bend, the roadblock's twin. Different truck, same cones, 2 boys this time, 18, 19, with vests too big and a walk that studied the floor. One of them held a slingshot like a joke with bad timing. Mateo's jaw flexed. He didn't slow as much this time. Permisos, one boy said, trying on adult. Already paid, Anna snapped and flicked her wrist for show like she had done this too many times. The boy's eyes darted, the way eyes do when there are people in trees with opinions. He waved us through. No one spoke for a minute. The jungle turned its head away and pretended it hadn't. The open cenote appeared like a miracle majoring in symmetry, round as a coin, the world's bluest well. Rope ladders hung from platforms like undone hair. The air grew cooler and smelled like pennies and mint. Swallows stitched arcs under the limestone lip. A few locals stood on the far platform, watching the water like it owed them rent. No big buses, no ticket booth, no one with a stamp. Where are the staff? The camera guy asked, suspicious that his ticket to authenticity might not include a lanyard. They'll be back, Anna said, but the tightness in her voice said she knew that for a sentence that didn't arrive. Do we go in? The Canadian woman asked, in the same tone you ask if you're allowed to sit on a couch in a museum. Anna looked at Mateo, he looked at the road. 15 minutes, he said. Then we go to the cavern. Not too long. This is not our day. We changed right there, behind towels and the polite turn of strangers' shoulders. The water took us in with that shock that has nothing to do with temperature, and everything to do with gravity giving up. It was cold and clean, and tasted like a coin you borrowed from a river. Light speared down through the opening and made a pillar in the water like a column in a ruined temple. And because Ruby is Ruby, she swam straight into it, and hung there suspended in shining, grinning at me like someone who discovered a new idea and intends to keep it. I didn't hear the truck at first because cenotes make the world far away. Then a horn from above broke the glass of the moment. Another pickup at the rim, the men in mismatched hats. Baseball cap leaned on the rail, watching us the way a landlord watches tenants. Sun Hat walked the platform and collected something from the locals, a nod, a signal, a nothing that meant plenty. We're leaving, Anna said quietly, as if the water could carry voice up the ladder. Now, 2 of the locals moved to the ladder and didn't move off. They didn't look at us. They looked past us, the way you do when you're instructed not to see people as people. The boy with the slingshot appeared again, this time with something heavier tucked under his shirt and a face trying to decide if it belonged to a man. Anna swam to the far wall and tugged at a length of rope that I'd thought was decoration until it came away from the limestone and revealed a slot where a handhold could be. "There's a second exit," she said, not looking at Mateo. "For storms." "Storms?" the Canadian wife whispered. "Like today," Anna said, and smiled the smile a teacher uses when the fire drill is a drill and also isn't. She led us along the wall, hands finding hidden cutouts, feet searching for notches, a route that wasn't a route unless you'd been shown. There was a low tunnel, a mouth just at waterline that smelled like old air. "One at a time," she said. "Lay back. Use your fingers. It is short." "Short like how short?" the camera guy asked, voice up a note. "3 breaths," Anna said. "People make promises to themselves in tunnels." The rock curved just above my face. The stalactites, like teeth, paused mid-conversation. The water was colder in there, old cold. I counted without wanting to. 3, 2, 1, and my hands found the far mouth and the world turned open again into a second bowl, smaller, with a wooden ladder that once had a sign next to it saying Emergentia, and now had a faded rectangle where a sign had been. We scrambled onto the platform and found a path through scrub, limestone dust in a white ribbon that looked like a sack bay, one of the old Maya roads that carry memory and feet. My body wanted to run. Anna held up a palm like a drummer keeping time. "Quiet," she said. "The trees have ears." We heard the boys before we saw them. Young voices hard with the work of sounding older. Radio static. Upst in the leaves like a snake with a walkie-talkie. Anna left the path and stepped into jungle so softly, it learned to be a room for her. We followed, and the scrub closed behind us, and the road like a bone sat there alone. We moved in that half squat you forget you know how to do until you need to. Ruby's hand found mine once, just long enough to shock me with the fact that it still fit. I had the sudden, stupid thought that I had been so busy teaching her to be sharp in cities that I had not prepared her for trees. The path rejoined itself with a better road, a biosphere boundary marker, a rusted metal sign with bullet scars, a sense of the world returning to itself. We could hear a bigger engine and then saw it. An old yellow school bus converted into a collectivo, plastic Virgin Mary on the dash, cumbia leaking from a radio that refused to grow up. Anna stepped into the road and waved the way people wave for taxis the world over. The bus shuddered to a stop, and the driver opened the door with a sigh that contained all the stories of bus doors in hot places. "Ijito?" Anna asked. The driver looked at us, the wristbands, the panic hidden behind expensive sunglasses, the wet hair, and made a decision like taking a breath. "Subin," he said. "Get on." We did, and the bus filled with the smell of river and nylon and fear turned to manners. A grandmother moved her bag and patted a seat as if we were children who had wandered. A little boy stared at Ruby openly until she crossed her eyes at him, and he hid behind his mother's arm in delighted terror. We rattled through a village that wasn't on any of our maps. Dogs slept with the arrogance of familiarity. A woman flipped tortillas on a comal in a doorway like religion. Men sat on plastic chairs under a tree and played a game with bottle caps and an old table, and an understanding that days can be wasted on purpose. At the plaza, the driver stopped. "Here," he said, and nodded at a building that had been 3 buildings in its life and was now a municipal office because someone had painted it that color and given a woman a desk. A man in a button-down shirt with sweat like flowers said he would call the Guardia National. Someone else produced water in small plastic bags. The grandmother from the bus put a hand on my arm and said a sentence in Maya that I did not understand and understood. The Canadian husband cried quietly into his hat. The honeymooners were very still, phones held in their laps as if they might explode. The camera guy put his camera in his bag and closed the zipper with the care of a funeral. Mateo and Anna stood a little apart from us, not touching. He looked at the road the way you look at an apology you might have to make. She placed her headlamp on the desk and didn't say the thing in her throat. The Guardia came faster than I thought possible and slower than my heart wanted. 3 trucks, men in proper uniforms, badges that matched hats, rifles held like tools, eyes that made notes without making you a project. The staff captain's voice lived in the back of my head, explaining how to tell real from theater. Patches sewn on straight, boots the right kind of scuffed, name tapes with names that were names, not nouns. The men moved through the village like water poured into a container, filling, not flooding. We gave statements in a room that smelled like bleach and paper. The officer in charge had that way of speaking that turns facts into stares. "You did right to leave," he said, when Anna described the rope and the low tunnel and the way we had made ourselves into people who could fit through an opening made for storms. "Who runs that road?" The camera guy asked, because he'd never been good at not asking. The officer looked at him the way a person looks at a storm out over the ocean. "People without permission," he said, "but they are not the sea." He took our names. He took descriptions that felt useless. Hat, wrong patch, radio, boy holding slingshot like a baby. He asked us not to post anything yet because the people who wanted to own that road valued publicity differently than we did. He offered to escort us back to the port in a convoy if we wanted to return now. He offered to get us to a bus to another town if we wanted to disappear for a day and breathe into the cloth of a different plan. We chose to go back. Of course we did. Our ship would not wait forever, and the thought of a different bed felt like changing languages mid-sentence. The convoy was 3 vehicles, their truck, the bus, our van. Anna came in the bus with us. She sat near the front, head tipped toward the window, jaw tight. At a real checkpoint, the same we had passed before, the guard with the clipboard shook her head, said something into a radio, and wrote a thing down that sounded like a promise when her pen made it. When the cranes of the port finally hove into view, a sound traveled through the bus like relief breaking into a run. On the gangway, the ship's security team met us with faces that had learned to be professional in emergencies. They took names, they took reluctant jokes, they took the honeymooners shaking and turned it into blankets. The Galaxy tattoo bartender found me later with 2 paper cups of water and the same small pen warmth she had for everything. "Sip, not chug," she said. "Your stomach will riot otherwise." That night, a letter arrived under our door. It called what had happened an incident on shore and used the phrase local authorities 3 times because words are barricades when they need to be. It reminded us, gently, that the cruise line cannot control events off the ship. It suggested ship-run excursions in future. It thanked us for choosing safety. There was a line from the captain that felt like him, not the copywriter. "Beauty is never the only thing in a place. Respect the other thing, too." Ruby slept like teenagers do when their bodies have voted for life. I went out to the promenade and leaned on a rail until the ship left a handwriting of foam behind us and the pier lights turned into math. Somewhere back inland, a cenote accepted a new moon and reflected it back to itself. The jungle filled the space we had been through and pretended it hadn't. When people ask, later, if we were robbed, I say no. Not of anything you can insure. We brought home our passports, our camera, the story. We left a handful of minutes in a low tunnel that will keep them for us, stalactites counting grains of time on their tips like beads. If you're listening to this on a ship, with your wristband catching the sun and a brochure open to a page with water the color of impossible, go. But go with something in your pocket besides hunger for the photo. Go with a plan that lets you turn around. Go with a guide who knows the names of plants and which ropes are decoration and which are doors. And when a road tells you it belongs to someone else that day, cones wrong, uniforms wrong, men with radios practicing authority, believe it. The cenote has been there longer than your afternoon. It will be there when the road is honest again. We call these places sky water, like the gift is what falls in. But the truth is under it. Limestone that eats rain, rivers that take the long route, and people who understand that some holes in the ground are mouths and some are throats. And all of them deserve the respect you give a thing that can swallow you whole if you mispronounce its name.